Hello, everyone. This is roundtable number 5. I am joined here by very esteemed guests here. As you can probably tell, like this is the most ambitious roundtable so far, the largest amount of guests that we've had to date. And our guests here are from different corners of the world and carrying different perspectives on the important work of art that we're going to be discussing today. So before I move on, I want to give them space to introduce themselves, what they do, and again, also everyone who's watching, please check their content out. Every channel's link is in the description for you to check out their content, subscribe, give them likes, etc. Give them all the support. Okay, so yeah, you guys can go first. Pixel Fusion, you can go ahead.
All right. Thanks again for having me here. So, Pixel Fusion, I do a bunch of videos about, well, it was about Zelda, but now I'm branching off into Final Fantasy as well. I do a combination of game analysis, of theorizing, and some Nintendo criticism, well, video game industry criticism now, not just Nintendo. Uh, that's about what I do. And I'm pretty familiar with everybody here, so that's it for me.
Nice. Well, good blood.
Yeah, so hi everyone. My name is Javid, aka Goodblood, based in Australia. My background is in film. I've done a lot of editing and directing and motion graphics for about 15 years on a lot of commercial stuff, TV, uh, kids animation, the whole thing. But for about 9 years, I've had a YouTube channel called Good Blood where I do little dissections on game design, and over time, I kind of found my love for story. So I do a lot of videos looking at storytelling, kind of examining the cross section between game design and storytelling in video games. Um, and I'm a huge Zelda fan. I also have another channel called the Hyrule Journals, where I do some smaller Zelda content over there, more about looking at the real stories, kind of behind the scenes of Zelda, rather than theories like some of these guys here, which are incredible. My background with Zelda was definitely in the theory world. Some of my biggest influences when it comes to Zelda stuff were Zelda theorists. But I find myself falling more in love with kind of uncovering the philosophies behind the stories rather than theorizing the stories themselves.
Nice, very nice. Rinkuto.
Hi everyone, it's Rinkuto. So I'm not based in Australia, but in France. So excuse me for my accent if you don't understand it very well. I'll try my best. My content is specialized in Zelda, the series, really just Zelda. Um, I'm analyzing it from the lens of the culture aspect. So to try my best to find the intents of the developers. So it's really around Buddhism, Shintoism, everything, every culture. So yeah, give it a watch. I've been silent for like a whole year because I'm working on a very giant project around Tears of the Kingdom. So yeah, stay
Oh
tuned for it.
wow.
Yeah, I'll be teasing it here and there in this live stream. So yeah.
Okay, that's
I
a
look
that,
forward to seeing it.
yeah. This is very exciting, actually. Wow, really good. And yeah, Monster Maze.
Hello, everyone. I'm Don, also known as Monster Maze. I'm an animator and editor. I started getting into the Zelda theory community around 2019. Um, I did a little bit of editing for another channel called Commonwealth Realm for a while. Did that for about 8 months, and at some point I thought to myself, you know what, I can do this myself, and started my own channel. Was already like working as a animator, like self-employed for a while, and that kind of seamlessly transitioned into my own channel. And currently, I'm doing like 50-50, making Zelda theories and doing animations for corporate. And that's what I'm still doing today. So mostly Zelda. I've started branching off a little bit into Elden Ring here and there. And yeah, that's about it.
Nice. Well, I reiterate, guys, everybody, please give these guys your support. Give them a watch. These people are fantastic. They have very unique ways of conducting their content, and I think that they deserve the attention. So, today's stream is going to be primarily about Tears of the Kingdom, namely how we're already almost exactly 1 year after its release, 1 year and 1 week to be specific. So a lot of things have been, processed throughout this time, like how people can understand this story better, and reminiscing on its performance in terms of gameplay, dungeon design. A lot of discourse was already took place. So it's one of those works that are very interesting to talk about on different levels, and just understanding more how what this important work of art brought to us. So when I say important here, by the way, I think it goes without saying. Like its predecessor, Breath of the Wild, was such a massive influence in the medium of video games. I think not just the media, but I think that gamers in general can attest to that. Over 30 million units sold just on the predecessor alone. Tears of the Kingdom sold over 20 million units. So there are a lot of people out there who enjoyed this era of Zelda and the freedom that it brought. And with that, there's a lot to discuss on how this works as a sequel. So I want to start off by asking our guests here, what is your overall take on the game's quality? Do you find yourself more on the positive end? Do you find yourself in the middle, or are you more negative? Just in general, like you might like some things more, like music, for instance, etc., but you value more like lore, or you value more dungeons, etc. So just your general feeling, like how do you feel about the game?
Yeah, I can go first if that helps. I I loved Tears of the Kingdom. I sit on the positive side as far as I really believe that Tears of the Kingdom has been or is the Zelda game that the team has been trying to create for about 40 years, at least since the first the Hyrule Fantasy in '86. Almost, is that 40 years? Yeah, almost 40 years. I think this is this is the one. This is the what's the word? Uh,
The definitive.
like
Magnum
the
opus.
definitive, or like the predecessor, the rightful kind of brother of the first, Zelda. Um, and yeah, that's where I sit. I think I think this is the one.
Okay.
I can follow that up if that's good. So, in my situation, I would give it, just like from a gut feeling, I would say 8 out of 10. I think it's really good in a lot of ways, but there are other ways that really rub me the wrong way. So, overall, a good impression. I'm happy with it. Could be happier.
Okay.
Um, for me, my first play was in the middle because I probably had like overused of the Breath of the Wild saga, and I've analyzed it for like maybe like 6 years, 7 years. So I was fed up of the Breath of the Wild saga. When Tears of the Kingdom came out, my first playthrough was pretty nice, but I was a bit disappointed and I didn't do justice for the game. I put it aside for several months, and right now I'm replaying it for my upcoming videos, and I enjoy it. Like, this game is phenomenal, really, really, really. I got a huge slap in the face the first time I got in the caves. The cave system is awesome, and the depths, while they are really repetitive, there's an atmosphere in there that is pretty nice. I like to explore them.
Nice.
I would say I'm in the middle, very strongly in the middle. There's aspects to it that I think are absolutely brilliant. There's aspects to it that I find a little lackluster, personally. Uh, it's, I would give it like a 7.5, 8, something like that out of 10, which is a great score in my book. So it's not like I'm like nowadays it's very polarizing. You either something is 0 out of 10 trash, or it's the best game ever made. For me, it's just maybe I got spoiled by other games a little bit in like following Breath of the Wild. There's just certain mechanics, certain things about Tears of the Kingdom that I feel that have been done better since. And Breath of the Wild was kind of flawed in some ways too, but because of its cultural impact and just what it did for the open world genre, I didn't feel that as much. So obviously, Breath of the Wild did have like an advantage in that regard. Tears of the Kingdom is very much like more of the same. I don't think most people would say otherwise. Like obviously, there's some very very revolutionary mechanics in there with the Ultra Hand and all that stuff. So for that alone, like it deserves like 4 points for that alone. Like the abilities in the game itself, like from a technical standpoint, the game is absolutely groundbreaking. It's insane what they managed to do. There's just other, maybe more subjective parts of the game that I feel like are a little lackluster, like the story structure. I think could have been done better, especially after Breath of the Wild, which got some criticism back in the day with the whole story structure, how they handled it, and they kind of doubled down on that to an extent, which to me was not the best choice.
I see. Well, as you guys can probably tell, everybody who's watching, it's a pretty varied perspective here. I guess I would put myself as well in the middle, a bit leaning towards the negative, mainly. I guess expectations can sometimes sour a bit, like the impact. Like sometimes you're expecting so much of something, and then that thing doesn't quite hit in a way that you were hoping for. It's not like I'm not saying something along the lines of, oh, I wanted it to go the way that I imagined the story to go, and if it doesn't, then it's trash. No, what I mean is I'm in the camp of the fandom that believes that the story in Breath of the Wild was actually excellent. The way that it told its story was unorthodox for Zelda standards, but I think that the way that they implemented how the story was being told through memories in an open world setting, and how the non-linearity of those memories make sense to the world, and how the player can unravel them. Like usually when you progress through life, like memories come back to you in non-linear fashion. I thought that was quite genius, and the themes around that game were so strong that I expected something of similar quality here. And like there were just a couple of things here that I can't wait to talk with you guys about, because there are some things that are phenomenal, like some things that have a very strong thematic ambition, but the way that it was executed was surprising in my view. So All right. Now moving on to the next topic. It is undeniable now, looking at Tears of the Kingdom's discourse, that it managed to garner a fan division on a magnitude that has been rarely seen in the series' history. In your opinion, why do you think that is? Do you expect the game to age better and people get a better understanding of the things that could redeem their perception of the work, or will this stay divisive for ages to come?
I can go
Yeah.
first if you guys
Go for
want.
it.
Go
Mix
ahead,
up,
Monster Maze.
mix up
Tell us
the
your
order.
feelings.
So I think some people like to compare this to the Wind Waker situation back in the day, which I don't think is totally accurate, because most of Wind Waker's discourse was before the game launched. Like as soon as people saw the art style for the first time, they were like, "Wait, what is this? What is this bobblehead looking dude?" Suddenly, like it was such
Yeah.
a big, it was such a big shock compared to coming off of Majora's Mask and before that, of course, Ocarina of Time. But after the game came out, most people kind of just changed their tone or changed their tune on that. And I think with Tears of the Kingdom, it's a bit different because here almost everyone I knew was super excited for the game. It wasn't after until it launched that the division started to take place. I do think most people have settled on where they are on this game, so I don't expect like 5 years from now that the opinions are going to be completely different. Maybe a little bit. Some people might be on the fence that will start settling down and myself too, like Brinkuto already said before, my second playthrough was definitely more positive than the first one. Because the first one, I do have to say, I kind of approached it from a theorist perspective a little bit. So the first thing I started to do was immediately go to all the places that I know have story implications. So all the landmarks that I knew from Breath of the Wild, where I was like, oh, I gotta see what they did with this. So I was just going from landmark to landmark, just trying to find clues and things. It's inevitable. If you have a Legend of Zelda channel that focuses on theories, that's what you're gonna focus on to an extent, which I didn't have with Breath of the Wild because I didn't have a channel back then. So it really depends on how you approach it. Plus, the game is very much like it has elements to it that if it doesn't work for you personally, then you're not going to enjoy it as much as other people do. So if Ultra Hand and creating vehicles is not really your thing, that's already going to take a massive bite out of the experience for you because so much of it is focused on it. I mean, they spent almost a year refining just the Ultra Hand physics. So clearly there was a lot of effort that went specifically in that part of the game. And if that part of the game doesn't click with you, then Tears of the Kingdom is not going to be your thing. Whereas previous Zelda games were a little bit more well-rounded when it came to the experience. Like, you always had your dungeons for the people who wanted their dungeon fix. You always had your story. You always had your exploration part. So it's a very personal thing, I think.
Okay. Well.
I can go next if you're up for that.
Mm-hmm.
So, the divisive aspects of Tears of the Kingdom in the community. Honestly, I feel that it's a lot of, and I know we're planning to talk about story later, but I feel that there is a lot of resentment because the story clearly does not embrace what we were hoping for, which is the old timeline. I don't know. I walked into this. I accepted around the time Age of Calamity came out that I basically decided that Breath of the Wild was a reboot. And I didn't like it, but I was willing to go along with it. So by the time Tears of the Kingdom came out, I was more accepting that this wasn't going to be Twilight Princess Ganondorf or anything like that. I think a lot of the backlash was unmet expectations were connections to the past that we didn't get. And a lot of the connections to the past that Breath of the Wild played upon, they ended up walking back. Be it Shamey, the girl who dreams of Skyloft, to, dragon portals, going to seemingly the sky in Skyward Sword. It seems that's not where they were going. They were going to the Zonai world, which is not Skyloft. I think that a lot of people are just upset that it feels like Breath of the Wild had vague connotations of being connected to past games. But when Tears of the Kingdom came about, it feels like they further distanced themselves from it. I get that frustration. I guess I'm fortunate that I was over it by the time the game came out. That's all I got to say on that.
I don't really agree with what you said, because I feel like the lore of Tears of the Kingdom works the best if we take the whole series into consideration. Because they added this, they confirmed the whole cyclical thing. And analyzing Tears of the Kingdom allow us to understand better what they introduced us sooner in the series. Like, we'll talk about this more in details later, but like Rauru himself, he's the king, the first king of Hyrule, and it sheds some light on Rauru from Ocarina of Time, who probably was a king himself. So these whole tidbits are amazing to me, and they didn't reboot the series. It's just they put an emphasis on the whole cyclical thing. Everything repeats itself. So yeah, I think people got backlashed with their expectations. Like you said, you didn't feel like the Zonai were in the skies, but there were some like hints about it in Breath of the Wild alone, and I think it's wrong to think that way, because the devs really had intent behind this, and my opinion is that people will change sides when Masterworks will release in August, because we will know better, we will know more about the lore, about their intents, everything like that.
Masterworks will certainly shine some light on the situation, but I am skeptical it is going to be the full unveiling that we want.
Maybe not.
Yeah, maybe.
I'm open to it.
Yeah. What about you, Javid, sorry.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Javid. That's okay. You can call me good blood. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, to answer your question about why there was such a discourse about it, and I think the conversation that just happened is probably Exhibit A, where it's, if you went into Tears of Kingdom with some theories, you probably came out the other side not super happy. But I think personally, and this is not to put me on a pedestal or anything like that. It's just that I let go of trying to make sense of the Zelda series a long time ago, where I kind of see it now, and especially when I've done a lot of like a lot of the guys here too, like research into interviews and hearing what the developers themselves are talking about it, where story is a pretty low priority for them. It's always been about the play. It's always about the fun, finding the play, and then building a story around it. So I know that the team they treat their Zelda lore like a toolbox, where you've got spanners and wrenches and drills, and they just pull out each one to just kind of fit the situation to what they need. I feel like Tears of the Kingdom probably convoluted or muddied the waters a little bit, where they did this really tricky thing where not only were they telling a story 10,000 years separated from the timeline, they also went back in time to like the very beginnings of Hyrule. So that we have these like little bookmark moments of this game and that becomes quite confusing because everyone thought, Skyloft, Skyward Sword, that was like the first, the first entry to the story. But I think I've been kind of seeing it like, and we'll probably get into more of this later, but I kind of see it as like, you know, the Legend of Zelda is like a story that someone's telling someone around a campfire, and as the oral traditions, kind of evolve and spread, everyone starts telling the story in a different way, and everyone starts to embellish different moments or different heroes and different kind of details of the story. So I kind of see the Zelda series in that way, and so I went into tears, not holding it too close. You know what I mean? Like I was just ready for kind of whatever they threw at me, and then when the Roru reveal happened, something triggered. I was like, holy crap! Like that still exists somewhere where I'm still nostalgic for like those story moments, but. Um, that was a long answer, but to say it shortly, I think a lot of the criticism came from theorists having their theories kind of disapproved. Is that the word? Like
Invalidated.
Invalidated.
invalid?
Yeah,
Crushed.
I see. Well,
Crushed.
I'm
That's-
gonna I'm gonna I'm gonna push back on that a little bit because that is
Cool.
something I saw quite a bit. I was actually one of the first like of the major like lore theory guys to openly express my distaste for the story, or I think I called it like abysmal or something like that. I thought the story was not that great, and as soon as I did that, I did see that kind of people immediately started assuming things about, even though I didn't give a reason why, because I didn't really know the reason why. Sometimes you just have this gut feeling and you don't really know why you feel that way about it, or you just don't want to immediately just throw it all out there. But yeah, I did notice like a lot of people started to make assumptions that, oh, it's because your theories were invalidated. Oh, it's because you don't like the timeline placement. And for me, that was not really the case. And like from the theory people that I have spoken to, like people like Zeltic, like Nintendo Black Crisis, Commonwealth Realm, like most of those people, none of them really none of them really care about their theories being validated or not, because we are used to our theories being invalidated. Like that's always been a thing in Zelda. Because it's so open to interpretation and because it's so vague lots of the time, and often talking about thousands of years of history that are just really hard to unravel. Um, like we are used to being incorrect and just throwing ideas at the wall, and sometimes they end up being true, sometimes they're not. Like for me personally, it's the writing itself that wasn't very strong, and there's obviously factors outside of the story that I just certain gameplay mechanics which I felt like they could have taken notes from in Breath of the Wild that just they didn't really touch upon at all. Um, like it's a combination of many different things, but I can assure you, at least from my perspective and from the people I've talked to, it's not because theories ended up not being true. Maybe some of them might be a little bit more married to the timeline. I am not. I've never been very like I don't really care about the Zelda timeline all that much. Obviously, you have to address it as a Zelda theorist. You can't really get around it, but the timeline has always, even the official timeline has always been like, yeah, well, it doesn't always work. Let's just put it that way. So for me, it's also the development cycle. Like it is a game that took a long time to make, and there was a lot of time to build hype for it, and
Yeah.
it ended up being quite similar to Breath of the Wild. Whereas, for example, Majora's Mask was like very like if you contrast it to Ocarina of Time, they're such different games, even though they have the same art style. And with Breath of the Wild and Tears, I don't see it that way. Like they feel very very similar to me in many ways, and that's okay. But you know, it will either work for you or it won't.
I see. Well, I guess with these takes addressed, I think my counter argument to this as well is that it's kind of ironic saying this because I started by saying how my expectations weren't met, but when I say my expectations weren't met, that caused my negativity towards the game has less to do with the timeline and theorizing, and more to do with the execution and the writing. I think that what Monster Maze said, I'm fully on his camp actually. I'm someone who believes actually that it's not a reboot. I'm actually anticipating a bit of what we're gonna say very soon, but I just think that the story can still be subject to criticism, even if you accept the timeline as it is. Like, I don't think that Tears of the Kingdom breaks the timeline in any way, and I'll explain a bit why later. I think it has a lot to do with the thematic proposal that the game has behind it. So things like, the foundation of Hyrule, like there's a lot more to that than just things are not what they seem. And even if I take that into consideration and say, I'm satisfied with the timeline placement, etc., I didn't really have like a lot of theories going into this, hoping that things were going to be proven or not. I guess it has more to do with, for example, how the formula that was designed in Breath of the Wild was going to be evolved in a sequel that took 6 years, I think. Yeah, 6 years to make, especially when a lot of the world, the assets, and the engine was already done right as development started. So there was so much potential behind the game. And I think that a lot of people came out with negativity, firstly because of, I guess, what they hoped for in terms of like the amount of time that they waited for this game. They were expecting a lot of content, but not just volume. Like we have a lot of stuff in the depths and the sky, etc. Of course, that's a lot of content, but people were hoping for a lot more original content, like instead of being so copy pasted throughout a lot of the world. And so and just like the execution of the memories, again, like they come back. There are a lot of things that are just people have different priorities, I guess. I would say Breath of the Wild brought so many new fans to the series. Like if you look at the history of sales of the last few entries, you could argue that like the core classic Zelda fandom is around like 10 million people, give or take, that have been consistently buying the games and being a part of the conversation and being aware of what Zelda is all about. And now with Breath of the Wild, we have 20 extra million fans that joined the fun here. So everybody has kind of like their own values, their own way of understanding like what's the most important thing in Zelda. Is it the combat? Is it the dungeon design? Is it the way they tell stories? Is it the way that music is composed? There are so many things that Tears of the Kingdom does that is different from the standard. And I would argue that even though it has a lot of its roots in Breath of the Wild as well, like a lot of things that would feel familiar, as Monster May said, like there is a lot of similarity between the games, I also feel that Tears of the Kingdom does things in a way that's different from Breath of the Wild, and in a way that it might not resonate as well with Breath of the Wild fans. Like I know a lot of Breath of the Wild fans who went into this game after playing like hundreds of hours. They know so much of the tech and just how they understand world progression, and the way that they done Tears of the Kingdom in these aspects were still like very foreign to them. So a lot of people might have been shocked with these things. So I guess that's my take on this. I don't know if you guys thought about this before, because like we often get so caught up in theory crafting, conversations, etc., that I think that it's probably more important to look at the bigger picture of, a lot of people are coming from so many different places now when talking about Zelda, that there isn't as much of a consensus on what a Zelda should have now that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are both out. So there might be some backlash when they see a content creator say, the experience was abysmal for X, Y, and Z, etc. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would say. Do you guys agree? What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, obviously there's going to be with a lot of fans, you're going to have a lot of new people with different experiences. Someone who grew up with A Link to the Past is going to look at a game like Breath of the Wild very differently than someone who started playing around the time of Skyward Sword, or someone who had Breath of the Wild be their first Zelda game. So that is one thing I will never agree with. People who say like the last two games, they're not Zelda games. I'm like, yeah, they are. They are Zelda games in every sense of the word. It's just a different type of Zelda game. Zelda has always been flexible. We have games where you play, like we have multiplayer games where you dress up, like play dress up. We have touchscreen games. We have Zelda has taken on so many different forms. If there is one series that should do that, it is Zelda, because it's one of the longest running franchises in video game history. If you're not going to change it up, it's going to bleed to death at some point. It's just going to get stale, and it's going to go the way of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I agree actually. Like I think it's remarkable when you take into consideration how many changes were implemented over the generations, and how there is still a strong identity. Like I think very, very, very differently from something like Final Fantasy, in my opinion. By the way, guys, Pixel Fusion here is also a Final Fantasy fan, so I don't know if he's going to agree with me on this, but I think that Zelda is like an anthological series, but it has the gift of working with such a large scope of history that it can still work within a very familiar framework. And as they change things, they still manage to keep it Zelda. Like I think that's remarkable. Like people might say something like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom not being very Zelda, but when you look at the whole series, like I joined the Zelda fandom in the Super Nintendo days, so I'm one of the old school fans, and I still think that the Zelda identity wasn't really messed with. Like the basic elements that build Zelda were arranged differently, but the skeleton, the meat of it all, is still feels like Zelda. So yeah. So yeah. Yeah.
To mention the Final Fantasy stuff really quick. One thing what the Final Fantasy has is that its worlds are each game is its own different story. And yeah, there are connecting points with the Void and minor things that try to connect them in a meta aspect. But overall, every Final Fantasy is a new story and a new world with new characters, with hardly any connections at all. And I feel like with Zelda, especially with Timeline, there's always sort of a shadow of past games playing a role. So there's a bit of a difference there, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. So since we briefly mentioned theorizing, I might as well ask you guys before we dive into Tears of the Kingdom itself, What is your perspective on Zelda's storytelling? Do you think that the series' approach to thematic writing gets enough attention from people? And finally, do you believe in the Zelda timeline? And if so, where do you think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom fit in said timeline?
Oh boy.
Yeah, this is a very charged question, right?
Well, especially since we have Masterworks coming, which could
Yeah.
easily, it's like a year from now, that could be, or even earlier if you can translate the Japanese version.
Oh, there will be translations going. I bet that book will be leaked like a month early and fully translated by the community.
We'll see.
Yeah, I pre-ordered it. Like I think it will release in digital, and we'll build up a team of Japanese translators, and we'll do it like in a week, I guess. So it's possible.
To answer your question, if you don't mind me going first, what was the first part of the question?
The first part of the question is, do you think that the series' approach to thematic writing gets enough attention from fans? Like, what is your perspective on Zelda's storytelling? Like, how vital do you think that storytelling is? What is, like, what defines,
Sure.
what's the importance of this?
So I would say that the thematic approach to the Zelda series has changed over time. And if you are familiar with the way anime is written, you can definitely see some influence creeping in over the years. Even as far back as Ocarina of Time was incorporating tropes from anime to establish certain things, be it Ganondorf's, well, evilness, and there's a lot that just creeps in. In particular, I would say that it really started to creep in come Skyward Sword. Right down to, well, Garaham's flamboyantness is an unfortunate, cringeworthy example of this, because anime tends to play with, the creepy gay guy as a trope. But when we get to Tears of the Kingdom specifically, and we see how Ganondorf is portrayed in the past, it's almost more like him and Rauru and Sonia are a list of tropes and not really solved characters. Like, they weren't built as characters, they were built almost as a list of anime cliches. And that's what bugs me the most. I like the characters, but I want more depth to them, and the game simply doesn't provide that. What was the second part of the question? It was about the timeline. Do I believe in the timeline?
Yeah.
Yes. I believe in the Zelda timeline. I am one of those people who will adamantly defend that the early games were built on top of each other with a timeline in mind. Zelda 2 was a direct sequel to Zelda 1, even if it wasn't intended to be at the time of its initial creation. Link to the Past clearly was meant to link into it. Ocarina of Time was clearly meant to be the past of A Link to the Past before they messed that up. Wind Waker is clearly a sequel to Ocarina of Time. Twilight Princess is clearly a different sequel to Ocarina of Time, and it just goes on. Earlier, I did say that I do not think Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are in the same continuity. Before Tears of the Kingdom came out, I thought that Breath of the Wild was a splinter off of Skyward Sword. What I see with Tears of the Kingdom makes me think that it's simply incompatible. That Tears of the Kingdom is clearly meant to be a duology with Breath of the Wild, but Breath of the Wild was not really meant to connect. Their initial statements of it being thousands of years after the initial timeline, that was already attempting to soft reboot the series. I think with Tears of the Kingdom, it's in a hard reboot state, but that's just me. That's my piece on the subject.
Okay. Javed, I think that this question might interest you a lot, given your work on Zelda before. Like you're very interested in themes, etc. And I think that. So, what is your take on storytelling for Zelda? Like, do you think that themes get enough space in the conversation? What is your opinion?
Mm. Uh, I I don't think I've thought about it to the depth of what Pixel Fusion kind of brings to the table. I think I'm definitely interested in what influences the writers and how they start to pour their own experiences and beliefs into the games. Even from a religion standpoint, it's kind of hard to pin it down because it borrows from so many different cultures and religions. You've got the Shintoism, the Buddhism, early days with like the Christian imagery and the first, the horror fantasy, um, and later on it starts to kind of branch out into different things. But you definitely feel, I'm interested in what that says about the developers. One of the, as I research a lot of interviews, one of the pain points is that there aren't enough questions to the devs around their own influences, like what influences them. You've got a few bits and pieces here and there of like they like manga or they like anime and some of these movies and other games that inspired them. But I think I can't say too much on the story stuff because I think it's like I said earlier, it's a low priority for them. It's down the ladder when it comes to developing a Zelda game. I think sometimes they kind of retrofit things and they kind of pull little. You've got obviously Breath has Zora and Ruto in the same game. So it starts to kind of play with the mythology a little bit, and I think that's just what Zelda games are. So yeah, I'm definitely more interested in the developers at this point and if what influences them and how they pour their own influences into the game. I agree with Pixel when it comes to the timeline stuff because there is proof. Some of the early interviews talked about they had documents, these books where they had timelines written down. They had plans for what the games were, but I do think that they started to not care about that so much. And when the timelines came out, and then the Hyrule Historia with the three branches or whatever, like I think that was just them trying to just make sense of it. And I think it's a shame that they did that because now everyone's taking that as canon. Where I think the joy of the timeline is everyone trying to piece it together. And so I'm definitely not a timelinist. I think maybe I used to be a long time ago, but I've kind of dropped that. I've dropped that from my kind of Zelda fan, my own personal Zelda fan like personality, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
I actually agree with you. Like the official timeline probably made it less interesting. the the whole mystery behind it is what made it so interesting. The fact that you had so many different ideas floating around, and now you kind of have to try to fit it in with what's already there. Uh, for me, the timeline was ruined the moment they came up with that third timeline branch, which technically isn't even a timeline. It's more like a alternate reality or something.
It's like a what if.
It's like a what if, and you can die in pretty much every Zelda game. So, why isn't there like an alternate version of when you die in Majora's Mask, for example, or in the Wind Waker? So it just creates this whole. You can tell that the downfall timeline was kind of made up just to fit all the games in that they couldn't really place anymore. Because we have to remember like there's like as hard as they may try, there's been different writers. There's been different. A lot of the early lore was written by Tezuka, which is much more like with the Christianity stuff, and it's a lot more old school fantasy. And then by the time of Skyward Sword, they really started to dive into Buddhism a lot more and more.
Mm.
And that the more you write the harder it becomes to fit it all together at some point, to keep track of all
Yeah.
the things you've come up with over the years. So I agree. Like, I think the individual stories behind each game are much more interesting than the timeline debate. Even though it's fun to think about the timeline, and I will continue to do that on occasion, but
Mm.
like the idea that the wedding in Majora's Mask came from a potential missile strike on Japan, where the actual
Yeah.
developers went to that wedding with the threat of North Korea maybe dropping a bomb on their head. That's the interesting stuff to me, where I'm
Yeah.
like, oh man, that is so cool. The thematics behind it, and I think we
I
can.
hadn't heard that one. That's new to me.
Mm.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh, there's so many of those little stories that you read where the developers just put in their own anecdotes, or their own beliefs, or their own little, and they take from every culture, they take little tidbits of influences, and they all mash it together. Zelda's just a hodgepodge of so many different things, and that's interesting to me. And those are in Tears of the Kingdom as well. There are
Mm.
definitely very clear thematics in Tears of the Kingdom, which I think are very interesting. Even though the story itself, like as a whole, or the writing may not resonate with me as much as some of the other stories, I still acknowledge that there's some really strong themes going on in Tears of the Kingdom, which I really appreciate a lot. So, do I believe in the Zelda timeline? I mean, obviously, at the end of the day, it's just a fictional world, so we can do with it whatever we want, and the Zelda developers allow us to do that. That they themselves have put forth this timeline and are like, this is just our interpretation. Don't let us hold you back. Just keep trying to come up with your own stuff. So it's very flexible.
Mm, I think we have to keep in mind that they don't do things randomly. Um, I don't know if you saw the interview of Fujibayashi for Tears of the Kingdom, but he said that they don't do things so to break what has been built up until now. And it's interesting when you look at the Skyward Sword. Iwata asks, I don't know if you read it, but um, actually they wanted to do a prequel of the whole series, of the whole saga, and they went back looking at all the games they've done up until now. And that's why we can still find some references of the cross, the Christian cross of the early games in Skyward Sword. If you look at the imagery of the goddess inside the, the sword chamber, she's depicted in a cross manner. It's interesting to look at this. The developers change, the games change of writers as the things goes on, but it's like a TV series. It's like movies. Writers change, but they don't overwrite things that has been built. So yeah.
Well, this happens when there are competent writers, right? There are a lot of people who, unfortunately, are hired to write stuff, and sometimes they apply a lot of retcons, and that's one of the things actually that calls attention to me for this series. I think that there is a lot of unsung talent, like that fans are so caught up in the mystery box of the timeline itself, that I think that, and this is why I asked this question, by the way. I think that there is a lot of conversation that I think was missed between games, in terms of like the actual character writing and the themes, and how how the games connect, not necessarily in terms of timeline, but in terms of the general idea of what the series is all about. Like the Legend of Zelda in particular, to me, at least this part, Tears of the Kingdom, I think got it really right. Is a cyclical story. Like it's the Legend of Zelda is primarily about a world, a civilization that rises and falls, and a lot of the time this happens because of poorly registered history, and characters that need to be aware of the value of being strongly connected to their own past, to their own heritage. Almost every time evil rises and destroys Hyrule because of a moment in time when Hyrule was weakened because they had very little social binding between the races, etc. So, and a lot of the times when you look into developer interviews, you see that there is such a thing as a story team. Like there is such a thing as folks that are concerned with keeping things, consistent and having some heart put into whatever thematic idea is behind the game that they're working on. So I feel that there is, a lot of things that might be more interesting to some fans if they took a step back from the discourse on like, like some people act like each timeline is its own like football team. Like I don't know if you guys had this experience, but there are a lot of fans that try to advocate for theories and timeline placements almost like, it's a part of what they, how they enjoy Zelda. If the games are not aligning with their timeline preferences, then it's all broken, it's all gone, etc. But if you look at the context behind the story writing, like the developer, something that Javed Monster Maze highlighted now, like that's the thing that interests me a lot as well. Like it non-diegetic context helps the audience understand the work better. We can understand like what was the thought process in writing each of the scenes and how this story might connect to a previous one. And I think that Tears of the Kingdom especially suffers a bit in discourse because of this. A lot of people try to separate Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild from the rest when you look at the creative team behind the story itself. There is so much inherited from Skyward Sword, which is a game that is so strongly rooted in story itself and connecting things that it can be a bit weird to make the claim that out of the blue they just decided to do a 180 and throw everything in the trash right when they decided to commit 100% to creating a very very strong narrative like of chronology throughout the series. So I guess that's my my take on what you guys said. I think what you guys said in particular to this topic is I think crucial for everyone watching, because at the end of the day, like this is what informs a lot of what you might hear from us, how we think a game might be good or bad on how it's placed in the series. So very well. And by the way, you guys said that you believe in the timeline, but I don't think everybody said like if. So everybody here believes that it's its own continuity, it's a reboot, it's not really connected to any of the timelines, or it's at the very end. Pixel Fusion said already that it's a branch off from Skyward Sword kind of in the beginning, but now he thinks that it's a reboot. What do you guys think, Javed, Monster Maze, and Rinkuto?
Yeah, I think I kind of see it as like the Fujibayashi saga. Like the three of them kind of, even though they're all three of them different games, the mythology surrounding them, I think that's what kind of connects them all. But because I'm not a timelinist, I can't say if it's disconnected, if it's part of the continuity or not. I think it's just, I'm happy for it just to be its own thing.
Okay.
Done.
So difficult. I will say for now, I do think if it has a placement in the timeline, it's probably at the very, very end. And I'm totally okay with that. I kind of like the idea of thousands upon thousands of years passing and everything that came before has been basically forgotten, erased, turned to myth, and now we have this new continuity going. And how it actually fits into all of it, like why do we have references to almost all the timeline branches and stuff? I don't know. Could just be Easter eggs. I am always willing to just chalk things up to, they're just references. They're just having fun. They're just trying to reward those who know the older games. Because like if we take one very basic example, there's no way that the ranch ruins that we saw in Breath of the Wild, that's
Was
not Lon
thinking
Lon
that.
Ranch. Like that, it's impossible for that to be the same ranch if you purely go from a story perspective, because that 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 would not survive for that long. It's in the wrong location. It's not. It's just a reference. It's just there to let you know, like, hey, if you played Ocarina of Time, this is gonna pull on your heartstrings a little bit. It's your little reward for having played Ocarina of Time, and I'm okay with that. Not everything has to make sense, you know. So for me, it I don't know if it will fit into the timeline in a way that is satisfactory to me. But then again, the whole timeline is not satisfactory to me to begin with. So I'm fine with either.
So just to confirm if I got this right, so you think it's at the end of all timelines, or do you have a particular timeline that you think fits best?
Oh, I think I would probably say I would probably say the Wind Waker, so the adult timeline to me always made a lot of sense because Hyrule gets flooded in the Wind Waker, so at the very end they kind of find this new continent and they establish a new kingdom, which is kind of that's kind of what speaks to me the most because Hyrule will always fall and rise again. And what better way to do it than to be like, hey, the whole thing is flooded. We established a new king because Hyrule has changed geographical locations or expanded or contracted again. Or so for me, I guess that would be the one timeline where I feel like it would fit the best. Because then you could just simply say, well, the reason why the whole like Hyrule was not there like back in the ancient past is because it's a new continent, for example, or it used to be flooded but now it's unflooded again after like millennia, and that's why there's no trace anymore of the old history, or barely any trace of the old history, because there's always going to be survivors.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And Rikuto?
I think it's related to Wind Waker 2, to the adult timeline, but it's a bit more complex than that. Tears of the Kingdom introduced and confirmed the whole cyclical process of the series, and I believe that if the Ganondorf scene repeated itself, it can go back to the whole chaos Genesis events from the beginning of the whole timeline, and this applied again before Tears of the Kingdom. I believe it's a refounding. It's not the first foundation of Hyrule. I believe it happened after another chaos event that destroyed pretty much everything, and everything has to start again.
Reset, yeah.
Fully agree. Actually, that's also my takeaway from that as well.
Yeah, because if Ganondorf wasn't in the game, then we could have said, well, maybe it is like at least the time travel part of Tears of the Kingdom, like the ancient past, could be like far, far back. But the fact that Ganondorf is there, that would not make sense if that was the case, because the Ganondorf didn't emerge until Ocarina of Time. Before that, the Mises Curse was just, that's what set the whole thing in motion. So the presence of Ganondorf kind of makes it hard to say. That even the ancient past in Tears of the Kingdom is still well after everything else. It kind of has to be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I used to like really be on the. If I was trying to place it at the end of one of the three paths, I used to really be on board with the Twilight Princess one. But nowadays, if I were to try to fit it into one of them, I'm leaning more towards Wind Waker. It also explains why the Triforce is basically missing and just an icon at this point.
Hmm.
But yeah.
Interesting. I guess I'm alone here in in the vote now, because I in the beginning I was also considering the adult timeline, but I think that over time I think I'm leaning more towards the child timeline, considering just the thematic background of the child timeline is the darkest, I would say, of all of the three. And like when you look into Twilight Princess's conclusion, there is, even though you defeat Ganondorf, there is still so much of an air of threat that the kingdom is still on its way down, right? Like the whole point of, when you play through Ocarina of Time and go into Majora's Mask, and you have this experience of Link trying to, find not only Skull Kid but himself, like psychologically. And this story in itself doesn't necessarily affect Hyrule, but the tone that this sets for the rest of the timeline starts to make more sense. That as soon as you move from Majora's Mask, you have yet another extremely dark game, Twilight Princess, which as you play through the story, you realize that, all the races are separated. There is a lot of animosity between races. There is a lot of racism between them. Like the Gorons are not in amicable terms with people from Kakariko. The Zoras are extremely closed off. And through this disunion, Ganondorf successfully gains a lot more power. So I think that in terms of just the themes, I think that Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom matches the child timeline a bit better. And also just I think that it makes more sense for, if there was any chaotic thing that could happen to Hyrule without moving to a different continent and having the goddesses, the Triforce and Hylia still be strongly present in this region, I think that the child timeline could fit the best. So yeah, I guess I'm alone here on that theory, but yeah. So
I feel like for every point towards one of the timelines, you can easily raise a counterpoint for a different one. And that's part of the problem here with trying to shoehorn it into a timeline. I think that's why Nintendo ultimately came out and said, it's at the end of all timelines. All the timelines happened. Your Zelda game is not, your favorite game is not disqualified.
Yeah, but that's the thing. When you look into the discourse by the developers during the era of the Wild games, it's actually interesting. Before the release of Breath of the Wild, they were very overt, and this game is taking place at the end of the timeline, etc. Like it's after Ocarina of Time. That's actually the first piece of information that they came out with is it's after Ocarina of Time. Then the game came out, and the press release from that time, from March 2017, they were saying it's at the end, it's at the end of the timeline. They didn't specify which one, but they were saying, it's at the end, at the very end. Aonuma, you may paint this as, Nintendo trying to sell their game, etc. So it's not necessarily meant to be taken to heart. But even when they were selling Twilight Princess HD, Aonuma was very overt as well in saying, I think he said more than one interview, that if you want to understand some things about Breath of the Wild, it's better that you revisit Twilight Princess in particular. And I think that
OIC moments, that's it.
I'm sorry?
It's the infamous OIC moments from the interview, yeah?
Yes, exactly. Like that. There was that one interview, but I remember reading a different one as well. I think it was in a gaming magazine in particular, that he was also, saying, "Wow, okay, this Twilight Princess might be important for Breath of the Wild. And I think that it's not necessarily the specific lore. Maybe I think it has more to do with like the thematic background to Twilight Princess and how it can connect to the state of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild. That's kind of the thought process that I had. So
he's probably just talking about the wolf that you can get.
that too.
Yeah.
That's certainly a possibility.
Yeah, that's a possibility. So now that we have 1 year to reminisce on Tears of the Kingdom, what are respectively the things that you would say are the strongest assets to the game, and which things are the worst parts in your opinion?
Well, clearly the best part are 10 or 1,000 Korok seeds. No, I'd say, honestly, for me, I'd say that the best part of the game, and this might seem a little contrary to what I said earlier, I honestly think it's the story, because I think the story is good. I don't think it's perfect. I think there's plenty of errors. You can easily ask why, Rauru didn't tell Link all about Zelda at the start of the game when Link is literally trying to find her. But that aside, I've watched so much anime over my life that I'm used to anime-esque stories. So, to me, the story is fine. I'm not happy with it, but I'm not, upset anymore over it. As for the thing that bothers me the most, I would say it is the hand-holdy nature of the game. And I have one really good example for this. So they give you Ultra Hand, and they expect you to build vehicles to solve problems, right? When you're doing the Goron event, and Miragia comes up out of the mountain, there's 3 heads you have to take down, right? They don't give you a pile of parts to build whatever contraption you want to do. They give you a completed wing with 2 large batteries and 3 fans and maybe a cart under it, so you can start flying this really good vehicle. They don't make you assemble it, they don't make you use Ultra Hand, they just give you the solution. And there are many times in the game where puzzles are presented to you and the solutions are so very, very obvious. That's the part of the game that I think gets under my skin the most. I know it's a game for kids, but you could make kids think a little bit more.
Okay. Javid?
I don't think it's a game for kids. I think it's a game for everyone who wants to play and get some therapy, get some play therapy. I think the strongest part to the game is the system in which they've built where you can play. So they, a lot of the times, so last 40 years, Miyamoto especially has tried to create the perfect Hakoniwa game, Japanese term for miniature garden, where it's all about player expression. How can we create a sandbox and give the player the tools so they can express themselves creatively? And even Miyamoto himself, over the course of the series, has acknowledged that they haven't achieved this yet. The very first Zelda was the closest they've ever come to achieving that, the player expression, creative expression. But Tears of the Kingdom, it really did that well. Tears of the Kingdom provided the sandbox in a fully open world. You can go wherever you want. You can climb anything you want. And with Tears of the Kingdom, compared to Breath of the Wild, with Ultra Hand, you could create whatever you wanted in a limited capacity with the objects available to you. But I think that's definitely the strongest part, is the ability to play. And now, since the release, we've had a year where we've seen so many different creations come out. We've seen Godzilla coming out of the water, people making Lionel traps, people making crazy, recreating the Akira, bikes and stuff like that. Like that game, in a nutshell, is player creative expression. And so I think that's the strongest part, and that's why I said earlier when I introduced my thoughts on why this is the game they've been trying to create, is because they've been trying to get that player expression happening. So I think even Pixel Fusion, with those moments where the solution is provided, I think that's a pretty, at least in my experience, that was a pretty rare occurrence, where a lot of the time in my playthrough, especially, I was just trying to figure it out. I was trying to, I had a moment just recently where I was trying to get up to one of the islands so I could get up there and glide down to somewhere else. And I spent a good hour just trying to create a contraption of how to get up to this island. But the joy is the trying. I found the joy and the fun of the play is trying to create something. So yeah, I think that's the strongest part, is that is the player expression part.
Nice. Rikuto?
As I said at the beginning of the live stream, it's the cave system that got me really into the game, because there's that true feeling of exploration that I found back in this game. It was through the cave system. Like, you enter one and then you cross a path, you go under the castle, and then you're into the depths, right to the final boss area. It's really awesome. Like the Satori cave system too, where you get into the heart of the mountain, and you have this strange structure. Um, you know, it's it's this kind of stuff that I wanted to see in Breath of the Wild, and I was happy to see that in Tears of the Kingdom. I think it's the strongest assets, because it's the expression of the series, the exploration part. You find small world building tidbits. Yeah. And for the worst parts to me, it's but the game, and it applied too to Breath of the Wild. It's that this saga has been made for small sessions of game. Like, you can boot your Switch or your Wii U with Breath of the Wild and play for like 10 to 15 minutes, then switch off. And the game has been built for this kind of playthrough. Whereas when you were playing to previous games, uh, I l- I loved being lost for hours in giant temples, uh, like the ones in Majora's Mask when I was a kid, the Stone Tower Temple. I was fucking lost in this, and in Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild, the dungeons are like the worst part to me. They are too easy, too small. The overall atmosphere is not really quite good. No, it's kind of a deception to me.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And Don?
I think from a technical standpoint, that's like the technicality of the game. That's by far the strongest point. Like you know, the abilities that you have, the seamlessness, uh, which is crazy on a device like the Switch. The fact that you can dive from a sky island to the surface, to into a chasm, straight into the depths. All the while, the music changes dynamically. There's barely any hiccups, at least not that I noticed during my playthroughs. Like, it's insane how they managed to do something like that on the Switch on such a tight. Like, Nintendo truly are masters of utilizing their hardware in that way, and they have some of the most talented programmers in the world uh, at this point. So I think that's one of the strongest points of the new games. It really feels like a technological achievement in many ways. Uh, as for the weakest part, uh, I wouldn't say the story, because I can do without a story. You can skip. Like, when I was a kid, I didn't know the hell was going on in Ocarina of Time story wise, and I still had a great time. So for me, that's never been like the deciding factor. I think my biggest problem with the game is the grindiness of it and the repetitiveness of some of the environments. For me personally, it's always been the case. Like if you find something and that's interesting, but as soon as you find 10 more of those, it's no longer interesting. And that's kind of like Tears of the Kingdom seems to be designed in a way where you can drop, like if it was like Google Maps, you can drop the Google Maps guy anywhere on the map and you will encounter approximately the same stuff always. So for every interesting building, there's usually a copy of it. Like there's multiple of those same mines, there's multiple of those coliseums, multiple like there's a lot of copy pasted sky islands that have the same structure, almost the same look even. Every cave is either a bubble frog or a piece of like attire that you find, like an outfit or something. Every province has that little guy with the sign. Like it's all built around the idea that you can go anywhere and kind of encounter the same stuff. So you don't even have to explore everything. Whereas in the old games, there was more of a sense of there's only one Ikana castle, there's only one of this, there's only one of that. Like everything felt very unique. And in the new games, it's a lot more like, oh, it's another one of these, you know?
At least in Breath of the Wild, there was still enough space to find some uniqueness between ruins, etc. Like you might have like a formulaic way of approaching different regions, but at least they still had a lot of individuality, and even the bosses themselves. Ironically, even though they're all like different forms of Ganon, they still played. They still, like, the battle itself played out very differently. They had different things for you to worry about. They looked different. Here in Tears of the Kingdom, like there is not only repetition with the depths and the sky, as you said, but I think
the enemies.
Yeah, the enemies, and I think what really, really shocked me was the bosses themselves. Like, there is such a relevant role that an enemy like Colgera might play for the main story, but then you realize that there are like two different copies of Colgera, like lying in the depths, plus
In the depths,
once
yeah.
in the final fight. Like, why are they back? Like, it should feel more like an accomplishment when defeating these threats, but then you realize that there are just other copies of them in the depths as well. So yeah, there seems to be a lot of I agree with you, actually. Like I'm disappointed with the story, like in terms of execution. I like the themes of it, actually. I think that after you complete Breath of the Wild and you bring order back to the world after a post-apocalyptic event, I think that the natural next step to this would be building connections. I think that the strongest theme in this game is creating bridges, is building connections, like the imagery of hands being met, and the transfer of knowledge and abilities and spirituality between characters and races. Like, this is something that plays out in different scenes, using the same cinematography. Like, it's very deliberate. So I think that in terms of like what the themes are, they're very good. Just the execution and how it fits into the state of the world after how much time it passed between games, I think that that's what bugged me out, and a bit of character writing as well, but we'll get there. But I think that the weakest part is I have the same opinion as you, Monster Maze. I think that the grindiness, the repetitiveness is probably like and the water temple. I think that the water temple might be one of the worst things for sure. And the best, I think that I'm sorry, you were going to say something, Don.
Well, I was gonna say like it yeah, obviously it also kind of ties into the sense of scale of these games. Like it's much easier to fill a world the size of Ocarina of Time with a lot of unique content than a huge world like Tears of the Kingdom, which is triple the size technically of Breath of the Wild, which already kind of struggled to remove the. I kind of like the empty space in Breath of the Wild, but Tears of the Kingdom suffers from this even more because how are you gonna fill the depths with interesting stuff? The game already took 6 years to make, so it's not like that I don't understand why they did it, but if it was up to me, they could downscale the next game quite a bit because I value content much more than the size of the world. I much rather like traverse a world that's like maybe like half the size of Breath of the Wild, but with lots and lots of interesting stuff in it that is all unique, then I would like another like if the next Zelda game is going to be even bigger than Tears of the Kingdom in terms of the world itself. Man, I have no idea how you can do that unless you're gonna do like AI generative, like how do you call that? Like procedural generated
Procedural
content.
generation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not really that kind of goes against like Zelda has always felt very handcrafted to me. Like we have this world for you that we really thought about, and we know exactly where you want to go, and like there's a lot of psychology behind it too. If you look at the development cycle of Breath of the Wild and how they thought about like, oh, if we place this mountain here, then they're gonna be able to see this, but they won't be able to see that, and from there
Yeah.
they could kind of predict, like almost created like this model of how these like their own playtesters would go uh, explore this world. And I guess Breath of the Wild had the advantage that it was completely new. So this whole Hyrule was completely new. And Tears of the Kingdom, obviously, 1/3 of the game, or maybe a little, the sky, uh, I guess you could say, is not as big. So let's say like 40% of the game is reused content in terms of the overworld itself. So you already lose a little bit of the surprise there, and then the depths didn't add enough of variety.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So
Actually, I missed that attention to detail, like in terms of the psychology of creating the depths in a way that you can look at a distance and say, "Oh, what is that little thing?" etc. I guess I don't know how long it took for them to create the depths. The depths to me felt more like a sort of response to Elden Ring when you go into its own version of the depths. Like everybody talks about if you were to talk to Elden Ring fans, like what were their most memorable experiences, that would be like one of the top ones for them for sure. And I think
yeah,
that
Shofa River.
yeah, like
A
the
lot of
yeah.
go ahead. I was going to say that a lot of people make the comparison to Elden Ring there, but to me, it always seemed like the depths were pulled as an inspiration from Stranger Things. With the if you guys are familiar with the show, there's like an upside down world that's very spore focused, very dark, and it's very similar to the depths.
Oh
So
yeah.
when I saw the depths, I was like, oh, they just watched Stranger Things.
Yeah, in terms of aesthetics, I agree, but I think in terms of like game of like the player experience, I think that the emotional response that they wanted to generate from fans is also to say, oh, Elden Ring showed a much larger world, like in terms of scale than Breath of the Wild. We can do that. We can outdo them again. So I felt that this was a bit of that. And also another significant inspiration might be as well, like the Dark World from A Link to the Past, right? Because at the end of the day, the depths are pretty much like a quote unquote dark world, a dark version of Hyrule. Like the map is basically a mirror of the terrain on the surface. So thematically speaking, it seems like they wanted to create this Hyrule's version of the Dark World in a way. but yeah, so one thing that I wanted to add before we move on to the story, I think that there is one strong asset that I wanted to hear from you guys if you agree. But I think that the music in the era of the Wild games, especially Tears of the Kingdom, is such a wonderful work. Like, I don't know, it's so strongly thematic, and the way that they programmed how the music is dynamic in Tears of the Kingdom in particular blew me away. Like how the music progresses as you go to the Wind Temple, how the music in the shrines progress depending on how much you're progressing on the puzzle. Like I don't know if you guys watched the GDC talk on Tears of the Kingdom that happened like a couple of months ago, but just the technical aspects behind the sound design and the physics behind everything. Like they connected the sound design with the physics engine, so they created unique sounds that the team didn't even need to record. Like they created sounds of wood and then sounds of the object hitting on water, and then if you create a boat pedal, etc., like the movement in the water is automatically generated. Like it's not something that they needed to record. The actual game is processing that, like it's quote unquote imagining what that would sound like in a natural way. It was all programmed like in an automatic fashion. It's amazing. So what are you guys' opinion on music in particular?
I think
Well,
Tears of the Kingdom soundtrack was better than Breath of the Wild to me. Like, as you said, the ascent to the Wind Temple was like a huge slap in the face when you're above the tornado and you fall down to the temple, the stormy arc, I guess in English. I don't remember the name.
Yeah, Ark.
It was like a huge event to me, and also the descent to Ganon's lair was awesome. It builds to the hype. So yeah, I can't wait for the soundtrack to release to listen to the music without the SFX. But because if you rip the music from the game, you still have the sound effects from the cutscenes. So yeah, it's not a pleasant way to listen to them.
so the music for me, I love the music to Tears of the Kingdom, and what you were talking about with the sound system, the physics behind it, how sound echoes around walls and whatnot. I was recently surprised. I forget whose video it was I was watching, but somebody brought up how in the shrines, if you're taking too long on a puzzle, the music slows down to like sort of encourage you to think about things more. And that's a subtlety I never hit. And believe me, there were times in which I stood around feeling like an idiot with a puzzle. But there's just a lot of little details with the music. And if you've looked at the music, at the ripped music tracks, there's like over 1,000 of them. And they're all little permutations of how it flows into different things. It's very complicated. I wish they had put a level of complication like that with some of the other things in the game. I mean, they can make this huge music system, but they can't give us some Sheikah tech journals. That would have been cool.
Yeah, the music was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Wow, I have a hard hard time with that word for some reason. But yeah, I have nothing else to add. It's the music is amazing. The Especially the music during the ending is probably one of my favorite soundtracks ever. When you have to catch Zelda, just the way that the original theme comes back, it's yeah, goosebumps.
Yeah, same here. Like I think it was it did what it needed to do as far as talking about the interactivity to a degree between the player and the music. I think that was genius. Where I don't think, you know, the music followed what the player was doing, not necessarily influence too much. Sometimes when you go down in the depths, when that dark kind of music swells around you, it feels perfectly matched to what's happening in the moment. But it didn't come in earlier. Like as you're standing over the depths, there wasn't this dark swelling. The music only happened when the player did something, and I think that was a great way to do it, where the player wasn't influenced by the music so much. Although that has been done really well, like in Ocarina of Time, when you're running up the staircase in the castle and you hear the organ getting louder and louder, there are some cool moments of like where they've done that in a really kind of dramatic way. But yeah, I think for being in the world, the music played its part and just let the player, took influence from the player. But then in the more dramatic moments, when you're fighting a boss or you're in a story moment, it kind of did its thing in there too, and it swelled up and it became something really powerful.
All right. Well, with all of these things addressed, we'll now move into story real quick. So, first off, I think we gave a little bit already of our general impressions of the story. So, with regards to the actual intro of the game, which would be comprised primarily of the sequence underneath Hyrule Castle and the Great Sky Island tutorial, how good do you think that was as a story setup and a setup for the general experience of the game?
I thought it was great. Very atmospheric. Good build up. Very unique way to open up a Zelda game, because I think like 99% of Zelda games is Link waking up somewhere, either in his bed or whatever. So just having you suddenly stand there underground and you hear that ominous music. It's a very, very interesting way to open up a Zelda game to me.
Yeah, I think it did. It was a good place to start, at least the way that that intro kind of paced itself out, where you got enough time with Zelda to establish a lot of the important things you need for the story going forward. So you really got to see her shine, that she loves mysteries and she loves history, and she got really giddy finding these ruins and these images on the walls. And so I think it did a pretty good job placing Zelda in her element, because we needed to attach ourselves to her quickly, because something bad was about to happen and we were about to lose her. And I think if we didn't see her, or if we didn't have a chance to care about her, I don't think we would have cared so much about the story, and then the ending wouldn't have been as impactful. So I think it did a good job of like placing us in a scenario where we see Zelda as her true self, being really giddy about kind of discovering these things. Yeah, I think it was good, and also like holding a torch, going down to the caves, established a sense of mystery, so, like curiosity, something mysterious, something kind of mythological. Yeah, it kind of ticked all. I think it did a really good job ticking all the boxes.
Yeah, that really helps to flush out Zelda's character a lot. The fact that they speak to her sciency, like nerdy side of her,
Yeah,
which is probably my favorite thing they've ever done with the character in general. Uh, it
yeah,
really felt like even the fact that she opened up a school in Hateno village, that just it was like that. Yeah, that is exactly what she would do. She cares about
Mm,
knowledge. She cares about learning and archaeology and all that kind of stuff. So education obviously plays into that very well. So that
mm,
uh, even if you didn't play Breath of the Wild, which let's be fair, most people probably did before they started Tears of the Kingdom. But even if you didn't, you do get kind of that feeling during the intro with her, just how even though they're in this really creepy environment and there's clearly a sense of danger there, she cares more about the discovery than she does about anything else.
yeah,
She's just constantly taking pictures, and then when you hear this ominous music rising up when she talks about the imprisoning war,
Yeah.
and then she just turns around and she's like, "This is great!" Like it just felt like such a good piece of story writing, or sorry, character writing.
Not only
It
that, but it also shows how much she cares for Link because he's attacked by 3 keys and
Oh, I was gonna bring this up. Go ahead. Go ahead.
in the previous game, like Link literally obliterated the big bad guy, and 100 years ago he was fighting Linos and monsters everywhere, and for 3 kisses, like Zelda is carrying as she loves him. Like it's a whole new characterization of the princess. She really loves and truly loves Link. It's awesome.
So I was going to bring up that in my playthrough, when I first started the game, you know, Zelda's behavior at the start of the game, it's really great. It's a crash course into her character. For those who didn't play Breath of the Wild, that's all great. The keys I wanted to talk about, because the first time when I was playing, I killed the keys really quickly and saw the cutscene afterwards. But then I thought to myself, those keys could hurt me. So I reloaded and I let them just, knock out my 30 hearts and see how Zelda reacts. No reaction. She doesn't care at all if you get killed. That really bugged me. The rest of the intro is fantastic. I love going down to Ganon. I love seeing the spiral and the purification unit thing. I love the stuff with Rauru in the sky. But that one detail about her not responding to Link getting killed by keys, that really bugged me.
There is something.
Why? Why did it bug you?
Because it feels like they should have had her say something at a minimum.
I guess he was expecting something like a more interactive way of reflecting what the next cutscene would be like, right? If she's so concerned with Link facing 3 keys, which is like extremely easy, and she kind of knows it. If she sees Link being attacked, like she would probably, I don't know, say something or do something. I guess that's his expectation. I'm assuming. I don't want to speak for you, but that's what I got.
It's just that I'd sort of expect that if Link was getting killed by monsters, she would at least react while it is happening. She stands there and watches. Now, if I'm going to criticize her behavior, I might ask why she doesn't blow up Ganon the moment that he, cracks his neck and looks at her menacingly. She should be able to with her powers, or maybe she can't, but they don't really say that. It's...
They kind of say that at the end of Breath of the Wild. They imply that her power has severely dwindled, if not completely. It's all but gone, because of the seal. She kept Calamity Ganon imprisoned for over 100 years, and then at the end she does that little giant Kamehameha energy ball, and then at the end it's just like, wow, I really exhausted I really drained all of my energy. She even says she can no longer hear the voice inside the sword, so I guess she lost some sort of connection.
But she can still hear the voice inside the store. We see that later.
Well, yeah, later she can, but I don't know exactly how it would work on a technical level, obviously, because it's magic based. We don't even know exactly where her power comes from, if she's in possession of the full Triforce or something like that, or if it's just Hylia's essence, or
Sure.
Because obviously she never had the sealing power before. That's kind of been established by Breath of the Wild. Back in the day, she could only conjure up the light arrows, and she would help the sages seal away Ganon. But her doing all of this on her own is something that wasn't established until Breath of the Wild. So I don't know, but I guess I would say it does make sense that she's kind of helpless in that situation, because whatever thing she had in Breath of the Wild, that's kind of severely diminished, if not gone, by that point.
But isn't that force, that light force inside of her, the thing that the Secret Stone uses to turn her into the Light Dragon? Isn't that the thing she feeds to the Master Sword for thousands of years? If her
A
power
life
is
force,
triggered,
yeah.
if her power is triggered by love for Link, and I know some people don't think that they're in love, but a sense of him being in danger, and he is literally about to be killed with a broken sword by Ganon, you would think that would trigger something in her if she still had her light powers. But she does have her light powers. Sonya can sense them.
Well, I
Yeah,
guess
I'm not sure.
we're gonna get to that real quick. I just want to before we move on to the next part of the story. There is one thing that Javid and Don mentioned about Zelda's characterization. If there is one thing that I really love about making her a history geek, is that not only does it really hit the heart of the series about the embracement of history being like an identity creating thing for people to become stronger, but it also connects so well with her role in the series as like the one in possession of the Triforce of Wisdom, right? If she is more aligned with wisdom, like throughout history in Zelda, she was more aligned with wisdom because of her, her maturity in terms of being a fair leader, in terms of her role as a princess, etc. There has never been a Princess Zelda before that was more detached from her role as like connected to a divine deity and being a proper ruler like her other companions were throughout the series. But this one is much more interested in the actual knowledge of the world, and I think that built a very unique Princess Zelda, and I think that this character built a very strong thematic root for both games to the general series. So what you guys said was actually brilliant. I didn't think that through until you guys actually called attention to it. So and with regards to the tutorial itself, do you guys enjoyed it, like in terms of the Great Sky Island? Of course, it's basically a new Great Plateau, but it's not as open-ended as the Great Plateau was. What do you guys think about the linearity, quote unquote, behind it? You can still do like in the reverse order of the shrines that Rauru gives you, like the suggestion, but there is a sort of a guided way to traverse the tutorial. What do you think about this? Do you think that this is necessarily a bad thing for a game that's about open-endedness and player creativity, or no?
Yeah, I think that's always I've got to jump off in about 5 minutes, so I'll say my piece and then I'll have to jump off. Sorry, guys, to leave you.
No problem.
Yes, so I think that's the dilemma, right? Like you've got the question is you've got this open world with this specific toolkit that if you I know some players struggle with the first island because those tools can be complex. In trying to get to some of these areas, you need to build some vehicles and stuff like that. I've helped my kids and even their friends, get through that first tutorial area just because they got stuck on it. So it's I don't know, if you don't have help, you need to be a little bit older to solve some of those problems. And so I think it's part of a dilemma that I think they've been struggling with for a really long time is, how can you teach the player about the tools without, hand holding them too much. And obviously Breath is this massive response to Skyward Sword, which handheld too much. But I think it did what it had to do. Like it guided the player through the island, introduced them to all the different mechanics, to the little what do you call it, the toy machine where it drops out all the the items and stuff, and also the different tools you get with the shrines. You get a little bit of lore background in there, talking to Raru. I feel like it kind of ticked all the boxes you had to. For me, it was just like, yeah, that's cool. Like it's not reflective of what the rest of the game is, being this open world thing, but it kind of, I don't know, it ticked the right boxes and just let you go after that.
Mm-hmm.
So sorry guys, I will just have to jump off. My apologies.
Thank you
No
for
problem.
joining us. It was good to
Have a
meet
good
you.
one, man.
Thank
See
you
ya.
so much, man.
Likewise.
It's an honor to have you here.
Thank you guys, appreciate it. Thanks, Hylian. Chat
Bye
soon.
bye.
Bye bye.
So,
And then there were 4.
Yeah. Speaking of 4 shrines, I actually liked being guided around on the Great Plateau. Or not the Great Plateau, the Great Sky Island. I did not mind. It's actually never occurred to me to try to do them out of order, but I immensely enjoyed the tutorial of the game. I really liked how Raru was around, talked about things. He probably could have talked about more important things, like how Zelda is a well, he doesn't know she's a dragon, but he could have talked about how she was in the past. Just things like that.
mhm.
Yeah.
The overall structure of the Great Sky Island I like, and I wish there was more parts of the game like that.
Mm-hmm.
About Raru not saying anything, uh, we already have it in Wind Waker with Daphnes, who's the king, but he doesn't say that much. While it could say to Link everything about the previous kingdom. So no, it's not.
Okay,
a problem
that's
to me.
fair.
Yeah, it's not a problem to me. It's the kind of storytelling, it's kind of writing that is that way. So no,
I would point out that Daphnis in that game does have a conversation with I forget the name of the fish, the angler
Jabun.
fish.
Yeah, Jabun.
They have a conversation where they talk openly about everything that's going on. You can't read it. You can decipher it if you know how to read that text, but they openly talk about it.
Yeah, but it's the build-up. You already journeyed with him for like some dungeons, so it's not the opening. It's not the opening of the game. You have already some hours into the game up until that moment.
Well, it felt a little more justified in the Wind Waker, I guess. All the secrecy because Ganondorf was like hunting people and doing his thing, and there was a sense of like a looming threat hanging over Hyrule, and I guess the King of Red Lions didn't really want to go too deep into it or talk out loud about certain things because they were in danger.
I guess.
Whereas Raru is just chilling up there on an island. There's not really anything stopping him from just at least explaining to Link, like, hey, she appeared in the past. He can tell Link about Ganondorf, who he is, where he comes from, why he's so dangerous or powerful. He doesn't do any of that. He's just like very needlessly cryptic about it and then just disappears. I'm all for keeping things cryptic, but then they should have found some sort of plot device to justify that. Because
Yeah.
obviously he does not know that Zelda is a dragon, because that didn't happen until he
That
was
wouldn't-
already
right.
dead. So that part made sense, but there's no reason why. And the whole story is kind of littered with that kind of stuff, where characters are omitting information, which is fine, but not in the way they did it, because it makes it feel like these characters actively are working against their own goals.
Exactly.
They're-
It's very
Oh.
it makes things more contrived, right? Like the fact that like in the Wind Waker's case, you have the player, like Link, is not really like the destined hero. Like nobody knows for sure. Like in the adult timeline, like the hero disappeared. Link has no blood connection with the hero, so King of the Red Lions even calls attention to this with Jabun Jabun. Like I think this might have been the main reason why he didn't just spill the beans on everything. But with Tears of the Kingdom, like the very beginning, like the one of the first things that that Rauru says to Link is just how much Zelda told him about Link, and like how much he was this figure of grandeur that he would be when they met, and he just didn't, tell him the things that would have helped him a lot in the adventure, that could have otherwise, made life so much easier, and not a lot of needless chasing down the false Zelda. So
Yeah, because
Just a few dialogue trees, please, Nintendo.
Yeah.
Dialogue trees.
Because if you compare that to Breath of the Wild, like King Rome tells you everything you need to know and everything he knows himself.
Exactly.
Like to his full extent, he grants you a peek into the past and exactly what happened. Rauru could have done something similar, but he just doesn't for no reason other than trying to build a mystery. But you can only it's the same way with these mystery box TV shows where characters are just not revealing information to each other only for the sake of building a mystery, and it just doesn't work that way. You have to have a reason why certain information is being omitted, or why characters are not communicating with each other, sharing information with each other. You cannot just do that for the sake of having a mystery. There has to be a reason behind it.
Now, I would say that Rauru does come across as a little aloof, and those what are they called? The tablet you can read later, that with the broken English in them. Like, they sort of talk about how he wanders, like he goes out hunting instead of being a king and things like that. Like, maybe within his character, there's a little bit of being aloof and looking off into the distance instead of focusing. But yes, I fully agree with you, Don, that he really should have mentioned some of this stuff to Link, especially if the primary goal at the start of it is go to the Temple of Time to meet Zelda.
Yeah. It just feels like it was missing that little exposition that they usually have in a Zelda game in the beginning, where it's like they at least explain who Ganondorf is and why he's dangerous, or I don't know. It's difficult to, like you said, he talks quite a lot during the opening tutorial section, but he doesn't really talk about the stuff that matters.
Exactly.
I agree for the Ganon's part, because he was there. But we have to keep in mind that we're in the present day, and he doesn't know a single shit about the fact that Zelda is a dragon or where Zelda is. And even why the Highlands are up there. He's clueless as us. So.
Oh yeah.
I think for the whole Ganon's part, yeah, I agree. But everything else, it's quite a mystery.
Well, the Ganon part and maybe the secret stones, just some basic information. I guess.
Go ahead.
I guess it would have made more sense. Like some of the stuff that Minoru tells you, I feel like that should have been reserved for Rauru.
Agreed, 100%.
Yeah, not all of it, of course, because Minoru does have her own little spin on it and her own personal takes, but some of the stuff that was in that cutscene, I feel like that would have fit perfectly with Rauru being the one that tells that part of the story. But again, they wanted to reveal that later for some reason.
Oh, can you imagine the complaint that there was a sixth retelling of the battle under the castle?
Oh God, yeah.
There is actually, it was actually shocking to me just how much retelling there is in this game, and not just for the imprisoning war, but like right when you finish the tutorial and you reach Lookout Landing, like Pura just retells every single thing that's important that happened like in the last few hours. It's like I don't know if they were assuming that you were going to drop the game after going to the surface and then stay for like a couple of months without playing, because I don't know, it baffled me just how much retelling there is of like what happened not long ago. I don't know if you guys
and the memories themselves, because there are in some of the memories, Zelda reminds things that are in previous memories, and
Me.
yeah, it's
Go ahead.
yeah, it's too much. It's too much. We already know what Zelda will do or what she has in mind, but they do some back. I don't know what the word is, but they remind some stuff from previous memories just to show how Zelda will act. So no, it's too much for me.
Yeah,
If I
and people say then that Tears of the Kingdom is too similar to Breath of the Wild, but Breath of the Wild's handling of this kind of storytelling, like it's so diametrically opposite to how Tears of the Kingdom does it, right? Like even between memories, there is no such thing as like a recollection in the way that Tears of the Kingdom does. When you defeat the bosses and you meet the champions, the way that the scenes play out are not like the same scene again and again and again, and yeah, like it's just so different. But so yeah, what were you going to say, Pixel?
I was going to talk a little bit about Raru, because one of my biggest disappointments, and maybe I should have said this earlier, is throughout the tutorial of the game, I really liked how he was present and giving information. And I was honestly thinking he's going to be your companion for the game. It would be so great to go to these places, encounter Zonai runes, and get, his ghost to appear and tell you some things. When he disappeared at the end of the tutorial, I was just really not quite upset, just disappointed that he was not going to be a consistent companion throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
I would have liked little nuggets of lore for basically every place you go.
Yeah, I agree with you actually. This is another thing that kind of struck me a bit as a bit of confusing design for this game in particular. Like it's a sequel to Breath of the Wild, and in a lot of ways it is very aware of what things that would be a natural next step. Like as I said, in terms of themes, like I think that building connections, creating connections, like after a broken Hyrule, the next step would be like to get all the races together and establishing like union, right? And one of the things that defined Breath of the Wild was Link's solitude, right? You are in this adventure alone. There is no companion like every 3D Zelda. There is just Link alone in the world, in the wild, with music that accompanies this kind of broken and desolate atmosphere to the adventure. And now that we have Tears of the Kingdom, like so much advanced, that there should have been a lot of rebuilding in the world. I don't think there was enough rebuilding. I think that was a large source of disappointment to me. But at least in terms of having an adventure that could have some sort of partner, a companion, would be a good way to send home this theme of establishing connections and being together with someone. Like I think Rinkuto or Monster Maze suggested that the power of Zelda's love for Link is what helped her regain her power. Like connections help strengthen characters in this story, right? So having a companion throughout this entire adventure was such a missed opportunity. And I think that Rauru would have been such a good character to do it. So you nailed on that one, Pixel. I think that that's pretty much it.
Likewise, they tease you again with it towards the end when they reveal Minoru's story. Because she basically says that was her intent. She hid herself in the Pora pad so she could be your guide, your companion. But for some reason, she didn't awaken. I'm fine with her not awakening. But the fact that they sort of like come back and say, you were supposed to have a companion and you didn't, bothers me. Because I want a Zonai companion to tell me about all of this crazy Zonai stuff. Tell me if the Water Temple is really the source of water to all of Hyrule. Tell me about the Goron city of Garandia and what its purpose was. Things like that. Just somebody.
I think there has been a huge missed opportunity to not have Rauru alongside us, because we have on one side Link, who is in the present day, who knows this iteration of Hyrule, and on the other side we have Rauru, who knows Hyrule from the past era, from his foundation era, and imagine the pleasure to cross some ruins or some cities, some towns, and then Raru saying some stuff like, "Oh, this wasn't like this in my era. It was something like that," and would have been so cool to have someone telling us of Hyrule's past, and you know, we don't explore the past, but having someone telling us about it would have been much cooler.
Yeah, absolutely. Some insight as to why there's no Zonai stuff over the Gerudo Desert. That'd be cool to hear, Raru. Or tell us about the Great Plateau. Why did you choose this place? Tell us about that big spike that Hyrule Castle is built on top of.
Yeah, exactly. Javier or Javier Vasquez in the comments, like he said something that I fully agree with. He said, something which bugged me during my first playthrough is the fact that technically Link using Rauru's arm was the perfect justification for him to tag along as a new companion. I agree with this. In fact, I think that the intro sequence in the Great Sky Island already strongly suggests that the only reason Link can communicate with him as he did was because of Rauru giving him his literal hand, his literal arm, because the explanation for how Link survives is basically, I took you out of the depths. Now you're somehow here in the Sky Islands, and the corruption on your body from the gloom was already beyond saving for your arm. So I'm lending you my own. So every time that Rauru appears, you can see that his arm starts to shine as well, almost like how
It's a beautiful effect too.
Yes,
I just
it
gotta
is.
say that.
Absolutely. And it's kind of parallel to how Fi worked in Skyward Sword, right? Like when she wanted to talk, you could see like the shining Master Sword, like the handle starts to shine, etc. It works in very similar fashion here. I don't think that there was any reason for Rauru to just dissipate like that. He should have been there, and I think that given that he already knows Link's meaning to Zelda and what Zelda means to Link, like I think that the minimum that he should have done as a companion is at least tell him, like, it's not just, oh, I met Zelda and Zelda said a lot about you. It's more like, listen, this happened, like Zelda came to us. I am from the distant past, and Zelda somehow was transported to the past. I don't know if she came back to the present, but this is what happened, etc., etc., etc. Like that would have already been a pretty good basis for a companion to be giving you exposition throughout the adventure, right? So huge missed opportunity.
I did actually have a little bit of a theory as to why he leaves like that, and it's a darker one. I recently on my channel did two videos about basically Zelda being depressed, and I didn't want to add to that because those videos didn't do well. But I think Rauru could be really depressed in the present after all of that, seeing how his Hyrule is so drastically different that maybe he just left because he wanted to move on.
But then he comes back at the end, though.
Yeah,
he does, and that's a problem. I give you that.
It kind of destroys the whole idea of closure in the Zelda series. Like, at what point does death still have any impact in this story? Because at the end of Skyward Sword, when Impa dissipates and she turns into particles, she's just gone. She's dead.
Yeah.
That's the end of her story, and there's closure there. Same with the DLC of Breath of the Wild, where at the very end, the spirit of King Rome and the champions, they finally are able to rest, and from that moment on, their consciousness just dissipates into the ether, and their story comes to a close. And the idea that Rauru can just suddenly come back again. Not only does he come back, but Sonya, who's been dead for like I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of years, suddenly comes back too, and it's like it feels like the Force ghosts from Star Wars, where it's like, well, what? Why would I even care anymore about someone dying at that point? Because clearly they can just come back at some point.
It,
Uh,
it, it's not
This is
really
such
like
an anime
comeback.
problem.
I don't think I don't think
No,
that
no.
this was necessarily what was happening. Like they weren't coming back physically, right? Like they were like in terms of like a Force Ghost with Star Wars. Like at least it makes some sense that them as spirits were there to try to guide someone with high spiritual sensibility. And I think that this applies to Zelda as well. Like the hero's shade in Twilight Princess. There are lots of examples throughout the series of people who died before, but didn't really pass on to the afterlife because of regrets that kept them bound to Hyrule or to something that they need to fulfill. And I think that Rauru and Sonya kind of fulfilled that role there. Like it makes sense for them to have that unfinished business. My only problem was how they used them to Deus Ex Machina the whole ending. Like I think that was the biggest problem. Like you could maybe have Rauru help Link spiritually and help him heal his body, etc. I think that that's fine, but I think that there comes to a point where a narrative commitment that is just undone on a blink of an eye through just strong spiritual power undoing the process of draconification. If that was possible, then why was this never discussed before, like by Rauru and Sonya in the past? Like, did they need to die to understand this? If so, like, why does Sonya not know this? Like, could they have not tell Link like how important it is to awaken the light dragon spiritually? Because all this happens in the spiritual realm, right? Like the only scene that Sonya appears in the present is in that misty environment. So
Right.
So
It's the afterlife. It's really the afterlife because I went looking into the game files and it's labeled as a spiritual world. Like it's
yeah,
really the afterlife, and they don't really come back. It's because Link still has Raru's arm, and if you look at Raru's spirit on the Great Sky Island, you can see that his right arm is like a bit faded because
yeah,
Link, it's the bridge between the physical world and the spiritual world. Link is the bridge. That's why they say he's the catalyst. I think it's the term that Minoru uses. And
exactly.
from millennia, Sonia was in the afterlife, and she probably was watching over Zelda in a dragon form, and she probably has time to think about a plan to make her switch back, especially since she has the time power. And there's something that we forget. It's that Force is not only in Star Wars, it's also in Zelda, and
Yeah,
it's inspired by the same exact thing. It's inspired by Ki. You know the Ki? You have it in Dragon Ball and, and a
yeah,
lot.
Very
Yeah,
aware of this. Go ahead.
yeah. And the Ki, the key runs through both the physical, the corporeal soul, and also the spiritual soul. It's also the reason why Daphnes, for example, is able to wish on the Triforce, even though he's a spirit.
yeah.
That's because he still has force in him. And that's why Link could, yeah, it sounds like a Deus Ex Machina, it probably is, but it can be explained with the lore we have.
Well, in
So,
terms of wishing on the Triforce, that's fine. It's the only Deus Ex Machina thing that really nothing in the series explains is just they introduced this new mechanic, draconification. They establish its limits, its rules. That it's all about immortality and losing the sense of self, and it's irreversible. But then at the very end, it somehow is, and there is no explanation for this. Like it's that's the part, like them being spirits and being able to I guess interact with Zelda's spirit. I guess that's fine, but actually undoing the process, that's the thing that is more like Deus Ex Machina.
So
They recall her past a transformation state. That's why she comes back with a secret stone. She ate it, so she comes back in a state before she ate it. They recalled her. Yeah.
So
I guess
if
you can always explain it. That's never been the problem here. I think the fact that you can explain it with the established lore, or everything can ultimately be explained, even if you just say, well, it was the power of friendship. But it to me, it's more about it removes the feeling of consequence.
Exactly.
And I value consequence a great deal in storytelling and writing and stuff like that. If there's always a way to reverse things again, then at that point all the rules kind of go out the window, because like I said, why would I care if someone dies or if something bad happens if I know that there's always a way to, like, there's no finality to it. And it's the same thing that you have in certain stories where, with time travel, for example, or like stories that involve hypertime or multiverse theory, where it's like, well, at this point, why does it even matter if someone dies? Because there's like 1,000 or an infinite amount of you in all the other universes, so there's no real consequence to it. Whereas
Yeah.
if you have limitations where it's like you said, you bring in this new concept, draconification, and they make it very, very clear, like what the rules are. Like, hey, it's a forbidden right for a reason, because it is irreversible. There's no known way to reverse that process. And apparently the dragons have been around for like since time immemorial. So you would have thought that someone would have found a way to reverse the process of draconification if it existed. And it just feels very, I guess, convenient.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, for this one character, we can undo it again.
What you said about like being, like, not having stakes, I guess that's what you mean, right? Like building stakes, like you are only invested in stories if you know what the limitations are. But the moment that you establish a limitation on draconification, and then suddenly the rug is pulled under you because they just decided that the limitation isn't relevant anymore, like how can you care about like what's going to happen next if the writer can just out of a whim just create something that can just undo it without any setup, right? And what you said about the multiverse is basically the reason why I'm so fed up with Final Fantasy VII. Like the remakes, the remake story is garbage, because
speaking of Final Fantasy. Speaking of Final Fantasy, I'm very curious about what you guys think about the like Final Fantasy. I think 13. It was.
Yeah.
Was it 13?
I like 13. I know people are going to hate me for that, but I like it.
Where they like establish the rule that if you don't complete your focus, or if you do, I think if
this
you do complete, if you
become a Seath.
You become a Seath, but then at the end they all turn into Seath, but then suddenly it's reversible and they all turn back. And that kind of felt like that power of friendship kind of deal, where it's like, come on, you know.
Exactly.
So, and what about all the other people who turned into Seath? I guess they didn't want it hard enough, or why are the main characters the exception in this case, where it's just they just magically transform back again, and you completely reverse that consequence.
It's plot armor.
it's plot armor of the worst type. Yeah,
exactly.
So, this is why I was saying earlier that it's a bunch of anime tropes coming into play. Power of friendship, plot armor. That's exactly what these are. They're tropes, cliches that show up over and over, and they get a bit stale. You're right to criticize Zelda being restored at the end when they set the stakes as doing this thing makes you a dragon and you're stuck. Now,
Yeah.
that being said, I honestly believe the developers intended a bad ending and a good ending to the game. A ending where she stays as a dragon, and then if you do a bunch of extra stuff, you actually earn your good ending. And there's a little bit of setup for it too, because Impa, she mentions once you complete all of the dragon tiers, that she is going to start researching how to deal with, or how to undo dragonification. The game never does anything with this, but it sure seemed like there was some buildup that was being planned there.
That's possible.
Honestly, if they had a really good writer, like I'm not saying I am, but I have an idea of how to properly provide that emotional payoff of undoing draconification. If draconification is about losing one's sense of self and mind, why would they not bank hard on Link being the one that would look into the dragon's eyes and say, I am back, I am here. And then the light dragon starts to recollect Zelda's past, like the entire history, like she was there just for this specific purpose. And then she starts to regain her sense of identity. Like the main thing that underpins this process and the stakes behind this is a question of Zelda losing, quote unquote, her memories, right? Not being aware of who she is, and Link's efforts and taking out the Master Sword from her forehead, etc. Like that should be such a powerful way of communicating in the story Link's engagement with Zelda as a dragon and trying to help her regain her sense of self. She could have, honestly, in my opinion, she could have even turned back into human if he pulled the Master Sword. I think that would have been an even more powerful way of establishing such a already powerful scene. I love the Master Sword pull scene in this game, but I think that there was so much potential in providing this conflict, a payoff where Link's relationship with Zelda is what helps her gain her sense of self. Again, the themes of connections, of building bridges, is permeated in this game from beginning to end. And I think that Link's connection with Zelda being the thing that could provide this payoff would have been such a good way to resolve this. I don't know. That's just my idea of how I would fix, quote unquote, this. Of course, there would have to be more exposition to say, oh, their draconification can be maybe reversed if there could be some way of identifying with the person who became a dragon. And this could explain why the other dragons aren't reversed, because there is nobody who lived in their time to be that would be alive today, quote unquote, to help them regain their sense of selves, right? But Zelda has that gift. It could explain everything. But alas,
I guess what it kind of comes down to is that it was just simply too easy.
Yeah, exactly.
The way it transpired, it was too easy. Like if we take Dragon Ball again as an example, the idea that you can only be wished back with the Dragon Balls twice or once. I don't remember if it was like once or twice, but like
I think it starts as once, and then there are better Dragon Balls that can wish people back to life 3 times, because people die a lot in that.
Yeah, exactly. Like at that point, you also like the idea that when Goku dies at the beginning of Z, and like, oh, he's already been wished back once, so damn, I guess he really is dead. And of course, they're gonna find a way to do it, but it involves this huge, like basically the whole Frieza saga is just about that. It's about getting the people back that were not able to be wished back with that's why they go to Namek to begin with. So it's this huge undertaking just to solve that issue. And I guess here it's just like at the end they just appear and they suddenly know how to reverse it. the draconification. Like maybe it would have been more interesting if the story was all about that, like investigating, finding a way, well, like historically how draconification works and why, like how it could possibly be reversed.
The problem with Tears of the Kingdom is that it starts some storylines that don't go anywhere. Sadly, you have this draconification thing with Impa, and you also have the whole thing about the depth with Josha. She talks about the
Or
mysterious
Josha.
statue, yeah, and it doesn't lead anywhere. So yeah, I think
Yeah.
there might have been some cut content, and let's hope that Masterworks explain more.
I
Yeah.
At
felt
least we
so
have
bad
that.
for her. Like, so she starts off with the wanting to solve that puzzle. Then I basically go and find all 120 of the light roots on my own, come back to her, and she has the completed thing and just seems, I don't know, maybe a little sad. It was. I felt bad for her.
Yeah. Well, so one thing that I wanted to ask you guys is with regards to the actual storytelling in the world. Do you think that it is possible? Like the proposal for this game is basically to tell a linear story in an open world, and of course, I think it's unanimous criticism that the fact that the memories rely on it being a linear uncovering for the story to have a proper emotional payoff. The player would have to follow a linear trajectory in an open world. If not, then they would spoil themselves and the payoffs would be ruined, etc. Do you think that it's possible to tell a linear story in an open world like this? What would have been the best way for Tears of the Kingdom to have fixed this issue?
uh, I'll talk, and then I have to leave. So,
Of course.
um, I think that when you have an open world game, you have to select the pieces of lore that you want to be linear. For example, the story about the imprisoning war that is told us by Minoru. It was the best way to explain us to explain the part of the story, because it was kind of linear. You have to do the four temples, and then you have the fifth temples of spirit, and then she explains everything about the memory system. I think it's a good way to tell story tidbits like the slices of life you have in Breath of the Wild. You know what happened to Hyrule. You know that Hyrule got fucked up by Ganon, and you know that Zelda is like holding him at the castle. So every memory was more to show us the relationship with Link and Zelda, like how she came to hate him, to like him more. And I think that Tears of the Kingdom suffered from this kind of memories, especially when you look at Masterworks that shows us the way Rauru and Sonia are together. Uh, I think that if you want to tell something linear, but you can see the memories in a non-linear way, yeah, it's not the best way to tell the story. I think we should have had a way to see them like in order, something like you can pick up the tears, then you have to go back to the Forgotten Temple, and then you can only watch them in order. I think it could have solved a lot of problem.
That's basically my solution. Is Impa reveals the location of each one at a time. And to be fair, they are on the wall in proper order. I picked up on that in my playthrough and was very stubborn about watching them in order. But letting people watch them out of order that was both a choice on their end, and it was also a choice to direct them towards Rito Village, with the Birth of the Demon King memory just to the north, like in eye shot of one of the stables, like the
Yeah,
one that
that's
reveals.
unforgivable.
Like, that's probably, if you're following where the game is leading you, that's gonna be your second memory. That's a bad idea.
Yeah, because it basically reveals so much, uh, not the least of which that Ganondorf has the ability to take on Zelda's form.
Yeah.
You see Sonia's death before even getting attached to her.
Exactly. Yeah.
And yeah, like bringing up Dawn, how that memory also reveals that the Zelda, the imposter, is made of malice. It is a Ganon clone. Like, that really just undercuts the entire modern story of, oh look, there's this mysterious Zelda running around doing all these bad things. I wonder what's going on.
Yeah, because the first time you see her apparition at the castle, I was genuinely thinking like, oh, maybe she's like projecting herself through time, trying to like guide you and help you along the way in some way, trying to give you hints, but maybe there's a limit to it, like she cannot physically speak to you. She can only project herself, and like I don't know, there was a mystery there, and then that immediately gets shattered after that because they make it so obvious. It's I know it's partially a game for kids, but don't underestimate how smart kids can be. You don't have like you can build a smart story which a kid can comprehend as well. But this was just too obvious. It was so obvious in every sense of the even without the memory stuff. Just the way Zelda acts. And the fact that these characters just don't put two and two together, it's so
Insane.
frustrating.
Yeah, like
It's
Zelda.
so frustrating. Like you come back from the fourth dungeon, and at that point you know 100% sure, like the Zelda that we keep seeing, that's obviously Ganondorf. That's just Ganondorf's malice. It's like a Phantom Ganon. Because you know you've seen her do all this evil stuff. In the meantime, you've probably seen a couple of memories. Like it's just more than obvious. Then you go back to Pura at Lookout Landing and you tell her the story, and she acknowledges it to an extent. She's like, "Oh, okay, so the Zelda that we keep seeing, that's probably not her. That's an imposter then." And like the moment she says that, Zelda appears at the castle, followed by a gigantic blood moon in the background, ominous music, like malice particles flying everywhere, and she's like, "Your Highness." It's like, what did you just acknowledged that she's probably an imposter, and then you immediately revert back to thinking that it's the actual Zelda, and like, oh, we got to go help her. We have to go to the castle. Blah blah blah. And it's like, oh my god.
Yeah, the
Like,
narrative dissonance is insane.
Yeah.
So, that's definitely a huge problem. But crap, I lost what I was going to say. Hold on. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I would just say that even though the game is partially for kids, it's partially for kids because it's for all ages, and there are so many examples of stories for all ages, including in this very series that has very smart writing, and I think
A Hobbit.
Yeah, exactly. Like there is so much like to look as a reference for this own series that I think it's not really reasonable to say, oh, it's for kids, therefore I can accept it the way it is. No, I don't think so. Like, I think we should demand more. We should demand for it to be as it used to be. Like Breath of the Wild, in my opinion, like has it deals with subtlety in a way that Tears of the Kingdom is quite baffling bad at it. I don't understand why, but it's you might have an audience that might not have experienced a lot of stories, but you can still make stories that are easy to understand without being ruining the mysteries and payoffs the way that this one does. Again, I think that the non-linearity destroyed the pacing of the story. Like not just the pacing in terms of how fast the story progresses, but more along the lines of just how you experience these important events chronologically. I think what Rinkuto suggested about getting the tiers in order, or whichever order you want, but you can only see them in order after you get them all. I think that is such a genius way of solving this problem, because you are still allowing player freedom, but you will still be able to experience the story linearly after you finish everything in the way that you preferred. So I guess that's the best way to solve it. Really good one, Rinkuto.
Thank you. I have to leave, so thank you for this discussion. Thank
Of
you
course.
for having me, and
Thanks
see you
for
anytime.
joining us.
Thank you.
Good to meet you.
Yeah.
Rinkuto,
Have a good one.
Before you go, there is one question I want to ask, and I want to ask all of you guys. Okay, considering how much ground we've covered and how much there is to talk about this game, I was wondering, considering the possibility of doing a part 2 of this stream, would you guys be interested in continuing the conversation at a later date?
Yeah,
I would. Sure.
Sure.
Because I think the conversation here has been so rich. I don't know, you guys have probably done other conversations in other channels or in other servers, etc. But I think that at least this one has proven to be a bit more different from what I've seen, and I think that it has been pretty enriching. So if you are interested in doing a part 2, we can. You guys are all invited, and we can continue from where we finish off here with the rest of the guests. Is that okay?
Of course. Let's keep in touch.
Of course. All right. Have
Sounds
a good
good
one,
to me.
Rinkuto.
See you guys.
Bye bye. Au revoir.
Bye.
So, with that addressed, so yeah, I think that just what you said about Pura acknowledging Zelda's imposter and how that scene plays out at the castle. It's just, I wish, this is why I'm frustrated with this game, because there is so much potential, there is so much emotional payoff power that could have been exploited here if they handled the way that they delivered these events. So
Yeah, it's like they had all the bullet points. They knew they wanted the story to go from A to B to, you know, they had the plot points there, but the connective tissue between, they didn't know how to get from point A to point B effectively, so to speak. So it's like, for example, the fact that Zelda turns into a dragon, that is something that they clearly conceptualized very, very early on. At least as early as the second trailer, which was 2021, if I remember correctly. Because you hear Zelda's lullaby being played at the end in the same instrumentation as the dragon theme. So I would say it's probably one of the earlier concepts for the story that they had. So they had certain story beats, they had them at the ready, but they just didn't know how to get there. And then you get this weird, confusing mess of non-linearity mixed with linear storytelling, and it just doesn't work. And I think there's been games in the past who've been able to solve that long ago, like The Witcher 3, for example, has a great story, and it's an open world game too. And it's all based on dialogue trees and the way they did it is really, really genius in The Witcher, where there's the fact that you go play hide and seek in a village does not invalidate your actions, so to speak. It has a way of projecting agency to it, but also justifies the fact that you don't. Well, and I guess Breath of the Wild did that to an extent as well. There is this looming threat, but there's also a justification for Link going off just adventuring, because it's all about regaining his strength and growing stronger.
Yeah, and so that's something that's always sort of bugged me. With the Shrines of Light, they're clearly modeled Yeah, it's the same mechanic. It's the shrine mechanic all over again. But it feels like there isn't really an in-universe justification for there to be shrine puzzles in them, both on two regards. Because the Sheikah made their shrines specifically to test Link, to
Mm-hmm.
help him overcome things. That's not the case with these Zonai shrines. Rauru imprisoned demons and is presumably decaying them inside as a power source or whatever. He didn't have knowledge of a future hero who needs to overcome these obstacles to help train him. So it raises the question for a lot of them, why are there puzzles inside of these shrines? But furthermore, at the start of the game, in the tutorial, he absolutely makes it sound like all you have to do is go into the shrine and absorb a little bit of power, and that's really all you need to do. You don't need to clear the shrine, I guess, isn't explained by him. One more thing that bugs me is when you get all of the shrines of light, all 156 orbs, I think it might be. I really wish that the corruption on Link's arm would have gone away.
Oh yeah, I agree. I agree actually. Like the setup in the very beginning of the game is precisely that the more light you acquire from these shrines, the more you are able to reverse the corruption from the gloom, right? So theoretically,
Like
yeah,
keep him with the brace, but just remove the black from his arm.
exactly.
Gradually as it grows.
I agree. I agree. This would have been a very good visual way of telling the player like the progression throughout the story and the strength that the player has, right? So really
Another
makes yeah. Go
Another
ahead.
thing that bugs me that I wish they would have done. So they talk about how the Master Sword absorbs light and becomes stronger, right?
Hmm.
And we all know that it has a hidden attack power of 30, a measly 30, which I guess is good for like base weapons, but it's not what we were expecting. Wouldn't it have been way more interesting if the attack power of the Master Sword was linked to the number of light orbs you had, because it is feeding off that light energy? Would have made it a lot cooler.
I'm not sure because the light sources would go directly to Link, right? The reason that the Master Sword has its power specifically, and I think that this is something that was said by the Great Deku Tree as well in the very first memory, is that
The
it's
very first memory you should have at the start of the game.
yeah, that's true. The Master Sword has its power because of the divine powers that were imbued onto it. So like it's calling back to the divine flames from Skyward Sword, right? So anything divine that would be given to the Master Sword would allow it to become something else. Like I genuinely thought from that point that the game was setting up for the Master Sword to be gone for good. Like even when you look at the logo itself kind of suggests that the sword is going to be different. Like it broke, now it's going to become something that the rest of the series in this continuity would embrace as like a new sword, a completely different iconography, but they didn't explore that. And with the light sources from the shrines, I think that they were more meant to be something that would be absorbed by the spirit that holds it, right? So I'm not sure if the Master Sword would be like sucking out the light from the person who's using it, because after a certain point they would die, right? So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
But
There are two.
I like the idea of having some divine power that could, strengthen the blade throughout the game. Like I agree with you that the strength of like 30 is not that amazing when you consider other weapons, but at the end of the day, yeah, I guess that's another missed opportunity.
Oh, and let's not forget about how when you get all of the orbs, Raru pops back up to tell you about that fun chest he hid in the Temple of Time that has his persona in it.
Oh yeah,
The,
I
okay, so Raru, you can show back up again, huh?
yeah,
Okay.
that was such a that also left me baffled. Like again, this is only further proof that he could have been a companion if he wanted to. Like if they wanted to, like so much missed opportunity. Anyways, there is one last thing I want to ask you guys before we finish, because as far as I know, you guys have just a couple of more minutes.
Hmm.
I should probably be heading to bed soon. It's almost 3. It's almost 3 a.m. on the West Coast.
Well,
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
this
understandable.
yeah, exactly. So, one of the things that since we already explored some later portions of the story, like it should be already obvious to anyone that Zelda goes to the past, etc. The story relies on two people being in two separate time points, and the story would have to revolve around Zelda, reforging, quote unquote, the Master Sword, reviving it as a dragon, and the story would continue on in the present as the Rauru and Sonia would hope for. But do you guys think that the time travel in the story was really necessary for the things that they wanted to achieve? So, for example, if they wanted Zelda to become a dragon, if they wanted to cover the Zonai and the themes of rebuilding and establishing bridges and connections between people and society and loved ones, was it really necessary? When you were playing the game, were you frustrated with the existence of time travel in this story? If yes, why? If not, why?
Mm,
Go first, Don. Go
I
ahead.
okay. I wouldn't say I was bothered by it. I did feel like the whole time travel stuff was getting a bit tiring. Because we've had so much time travel in the series by this point, and Age of Calamity just had it before that in its story. So I kind of liked the idea that it wasn't in Breath of the Wild. So I hoped they would continue that trend and just focus on the present. But I guess the whole Zelda turns into a dragon plot point would be a little bit more difficult without time travel involved. So I don't know. I guess it served its purpose. It just didn't do much, you know. Like Ocarina of Time was all about time travel. It fueled the story itself. But here it felt more like just there's some time travel going on, but it doesn't really impact the story or it doesn't really impact the gameplay, I should say. Like gameplay wise, there's really no connection to it. Like not even like the Skyward Sword type of time travel with the time shift stones, which at least had an impact on a pretty big impact on the gameplay. Here it just like if we actually got to control Zelda in the ancient past or something, or I don't know,
I
like
was really hoping the memories would be that. There's
yeah, I would have
in
loved
some
to walk
games,
around in on the Great Plateau while it was still like
in some
Zonai time.
games, in some games like Spider-Man and a few others, there are segments where you get to play as, like the helpless damsel character. But it's so, in this case, it would have worked so well to let us actually control Zelda for a short time and do plot things with her in the past. But they don't. Sorry, I
Yeah.
interrupted. Go ahead.
No, I fully agree. I fully agree. I mean, they could have made it work. You, for example, are confined to obviously I understand that they cannot they already have the regular world and then the depths and then the sky. To have another map which is ancient Hyrule, that would have been a bit too much maybe, but maybe some interactive cutscenes, or maybe you're only confined to the Great Plateau and you can just walk around there and see, like,
They
talk to
could.
people, like for example, gather information for Link about the ancient past. Like, for example,
Right.
say the location of the secret stones was lost to time. and somehow Zelda is able to uncover those by heading to, I don't know, like Minru's library and finding a book about it there, or I don't know. It feels like I would have loved to walk around there and see the differences between the Great Plateau in the ancient past and the one here, because we get such a limited amount of camera shots of the Great Plateau.
Yeah, and there has been quite an investigation on my part as well, but others in the community, like from Zelda Lore and Aurelian Historian, who have looked
Mhm.
so deeply at trying to do that. And in like blink and you miss it moments in the memories, you can see things that have deeper implications. For example, in the Gerudo Assault, when the camera is spinning around Ganondorf while he's looking at the Great Plateau,
Yeah.
for a couple seconds, you can see where Rito Village is, and you can see that big stone sticking up out of Rito Village is still there.
Mhm.
So that's there in the past. It was not a Sheikah creation for a perch for Meadow. It was there before that was ever conceived.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just things like that.
There's cool little details like that, like the dueling peaks still being one mountain,
Sure, sure.
which
And
unfortunately they
strangely,
didn't do anything with.
it's so what bugs me about that and the Hebra peak hole is in the depths.
Exactly. I
It
saw
is
your video, by
reflected
the way.
as.
I saw your
Thank you.
video. Yeah.
Oh,
That was something that
I
really
didn't
bugged
even
me.
think about that.
Yeah, like how is it possible that the depths reflect holes that would be made much later, right? Like, does the surface directly mold what's happening in the depths? Like, I don't think it makes a lot of sense. A lot of the things. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
There's a fun little theory that I have regarding that somebody in my comments, I forget who, sorry, brought up trying to explain how the depths could be changing. And they bring up the Froxes as potentially molding the land. And I like the idea, but it's not like there's nothing really to support it in the story.
Yeah, and like how would the Froxes be aware of what's happening on the surface, right? Like it has to be
Yeah.
it has to be some god levels of contrivance to have the frog the molding like actually reflect everything perfectly what's happening on the surface, including things that are affected by man-made structures, right? Like it's not just the dueling peaks being separated. So it's in my opinion, I think that trying to look into this in universe is futile because I think that I think that the most parsimonious way of interpreting the depths is just that it was a very quick attempt by the developers to create a parallel world to provide more content. I think that they didn't have enough time to actually flesh out everything because I think it's obvious when you look at the actual contents of the depths. Like the surface is so handcrafted in such a detail of what you said, Pixel, like from the developer interviews from Breath of the Wild, like everything was crafted in a way that players could see things from afar, and what could be hidden and what couldn't be hidden. Like there are landmarks that are easy to draw attention to. The depths don't really have that. They just inverted the topography of the surface and then just threw out a bunch of things that they already have and copy pasted throughout the landscape and call it a day. Like I think that
same with some of the buildings and structures in the depths. They've clearly just been there. They've been put there so that you start to understand the connection. Like, if there's a big landmark on the surface, chances are there's probably going to be one below it as well. So every town has a mine underneath it. Every Colosseum, the Colosseum has a darker Colosseum below it. Like all those buildings have, but it wouldn't really make sense from a story perspective because why is there a mine like below Terrytown?
Yeah.
the Tarry Town wouldn't be built until millennia later. So there couldn't have been unless the Zonai were clairvoyant and they knew that someday there was going to be a town built there. But it's got more to do with just game design and making the player understand, like, oh, if you want to find interesting stuff in the depths, try analyzing the map of the regular surface and you'll find stuff below that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's true. I did want to point out really quickly because I made a video about this. So in Tears of the Kingdom, there is a new lake off to the east of Hyrule. It's the one that they fall into during the ending. The one that I've dubbed Lake Mabe because it's right there on Mabe Prairie.
Mm-hmm.
So that is new. It did not exist in Breath of the Wild. But in the depths, there is a big wall there surrounding it because clearly they took the in-game overworld, inverted it, and modeled the depths around that. It doesn't make sense for there to be a wall there if it's a new lake. And yet, there it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. So just
it's a bit loose.
So just to confirm then, in terms of like time travel, like you guys weren't bothered, and time loops being in the story,
right, I was gonna...
this doesn't affect you guys were okay with it or no?
Let me give my response to time travel.
Yeah.
I'm a sucker for time travel. So if you throw it in, I will almost basically always welcome it because I like really complicated time travel stories. My problem with time travel stories is rarely are they consistent. And especially in the Zelda universe, they are not consistent with time travel.
Well, your favorite series must be Dark then. Right?
Actually, I haven't played Dark.
No, like it's a series, like not like a video game series, like a TV show series.
Oh, I haven't watched it. Is it recent?
No, it's a couple of years old, but it's probably the best time travel story ever created. Like, you will not find a single plot hole there. Like everything you've ever been able to point out about time travel, where you're like, well, how does that work? Like paradoxes and stuff. It doesn't exist in Dark. They thought that story through so well, and it's a linear or a cyclical type of time travel.
I will definitely go look this up afterwards. Like, look into it. Because now I'm very curious.
It is in German, though. And I highly encourage you to just watch the German version with subtitles instead of the American dub. Because, oh my God. They butchered the dub so much.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get used to it real quick. I'm not German myself. I don't speak German. Or, well, a little bit. But I don't really understand them.
So I've been on team subtitles since I was a teenager. I've been watching anime ever since then.
Yeah,
so.
I should have figured since you're an anime guy, you probably value the original emotion of the voice acting.
I'm not like fluent in Japanese, but I do know some Japanese, and I took it in high school. And I have more than a few people in my circles who help with that. But that aside, I will definitely look into Dark because I'm curious now.
Pixel, you said that time travel in Zelda is inconsistent. Can you be more specific on what would you say is like the inconsistency in time travel?
I will give two examples. At the end of Skyward Sword, Link places the Master Sword in the pedestal where Impa was sitting, in front of the double doors to the back of the temple, right? Mm-hmm. Then they go through the Gate of Time, and in the present, the Master Sword is in that location. Mm-hmm. But earlier in the game, Impa was sitting there, and there are parts earlier in the game where you can walk through that space, and there is no Master Sword. Okay. Yet, the game makes it very clear that modifications in the past ripple forward to the present, because the bracelet that Zelda gives Impa was there at the start of the game on her arm. Not to mention the amber you can see at the start of the game in the back room.
Yeah, where Zelda is in
So
prison.
that is an inconsistency with their own time travel logic in that game.
Wait,
Yeah,
Another one.
I'm
It's
not.
been like that since the beginning.
Wait, I still didn't quite follow the inconsistency there, because
Okay. So-
if Link goes to the past and drops the Master Sword there, the next time he goes forward, the Master Sword has to be there.
So what the inconsistency is, at the start of the game, when he first reaches the sealed temple, the Master Sword should be there, because he would have already put it there at the end of the game.
No, because this is why I was going to ask about the time mechanics in the series. The series never worked in literal terms, like a time loop before Tears of the Kingdom, right? Because if this were the case, then the timeline branch in Ocarina of Time would have been impossible to work. The timeline branch
Ocarina
only.
of Time is my next example.
Okay.
In Ocarina of Time, at the end, Zelda sends Link back in time in order to relive his childhood. The point in which he was sent back to time, at least according to Hyrule Historia, was before he met with Zelda in the courtyard.
Yes.
He appears in the room with the Master Sword, and then Navi flies off through a window, right? The door of time is open. How did Link leave this room? He doesn't have. Or why is the door of time open? Link doesn't have the spiritual stones on him. Maybe it might have responded to, I don't know, like the Triforce on his hand. I'd be willing to buy that. But there's no indication in the game that that's what happens. The next scene is him in the courtyard with the Triforce on his hand, confronting Zelda.
Yeah, but that's the inference, right? Because at the end of the day, like the fact that he put the Master Sword on the other end of the room, like you could imagine this logistics in particular for this scene. Like I don't think necessarily that this needs an explanation in particular, because you can infer from from the Triforce or the return of the Master Sword to its pedestal to be as a fail safe for a time traveler to go back there and walk out of the Temple of Time. But the point is that the time travel itself in Ocarina of Time and in Skyward Sword were always linear time travel. There was no time loop.
Well, that's kind of
Skyward Sword,
that's kind of what Pixel is trying to say, is that Zelda incorporates different rules of time travel which are inherently incompatible with each other.
correct.
Yeah,
and Skyward
but
Sword.
only, but wait, but this wasn't incompatible before Tears of the Kingdom, right?
So Skyward Sword absolutely presents itself in a time loop fashion. It, with the bracelet and the amber, it very much is saying these things happened. You see these things in the past because they already happened in the future. The part with the Master Sword is, at the end of the game, is likely an oversight for the sake of having a nice ending. But it should also be in the past.
Wait,
When it's
can you clarify real quick? Does Impa have the bracelet from the very, very first time you meet her?
She does. She is sitting there with the bracelet on her arm.
Okay, so well that's two different principles of time travel that don't work, that are incompatible with each other, because
This is why I titled the video Skyward Sword's Biggest Error. Go ahead.
yeah, because basically the whole idea is that she should not have the bracelet, or all the other stuff should not be possible. So for example, when you plant that seed in the past and then you go back and then suddenly that big tree is there, that tree should always be there. If Either that tree should always be there because technically you've already done it in the past. It's ultimately gonna lead up to that moment where you do that. So that tree should always be there in the future. I mean, or uh, like Impa's bracelet should not be there, and it only manifests after you do it
See,
in the past.
this is what.
After Zelda gives it to her in the past. It's like the Back to the Future way of time travel versus Dark. Actually, Dark works that way. Like everything already happened in
So
that
I
way.
am so excited to watch this now. I hope it's not a disappointment.
No, it's widely considered to be one of the best series ever made. It's up there with the likes of Breaking Bad and
So
other series.
let me address the situation with Tears of the Kingdom. So Tears of the Kingdom, everybody knows the story at this point. Zelda goes back in time. She becomes a dragon. She met Ganondorf. That is how Ganondorf knows who she is when he awakes at the start of the game. This is clearly a complete stable time loop where no alterations can be made. But
Yeah.
there is something that doesn't make sense. At the start of the game, during the tutorial section, if you look at the light dragon, she doesn't have a sword in her head. There is no light trail from the sword coming off of her. And in the cutscene, when you send the sword back in time and she comes up from the clouds, there is no light trail, but all the camera angles obscure her head, so you can't see a sword specifically there. Immediately after that cutscene, she is above you with the sword and the light trail. So, it seems one of two things has happened here. Either A, the developers hid the Master Sword during the tutorial because they don't want you to figure that out, which is lazy if that's the truth of the situation. Or B, the act of sending the sword back in time was supposed to create a ripple that changed time, which doesn't make sense with how the time situation is presented with Ganondorf at the start of the game.
Yeah.
It's inconsistent.
I tend to believe A, actually, especially considering how the game, how the game was made, the final product. Like there is so much. I don't know. I think COVID affected so much of the development that we probably are not even aware. I'm not sure even if Masterworks is going to talk about this a little bit with developer notes. But I have a big feeling that Tears of the Kingdom was a game that had some significant development troubles behind the scenes, and that's probably why there might have been a lot of a lot of copy pasted material, a lot of you expected a lot more content out of the game, and it ended up not being very polished. So like the UI design, etc. There's so much that seemed to have been that could have been fixed if they had enough time, if they had enough playtesting, etc. And it seemed like details like this in terms of story might have not been, they probably didn't have enough time to proof check everything. So that might be a situation similar with the bracelet in Skyward Sword. Like I feel like that is most likely, I guess the most parsimonious way of interpreting that is an oversight, because if the rest of the narrative works in one way, but there is this one outlier thing, then the most likely thing that happened from an artistic perspective is that the outlier is a mistake that the artist either didn't notice or they just didn't have enough time to fix it, etc. I tend to believe they didn't notice. So,
to be fair, time travel is just really, really, really hard to write.
yes,
so
absolutely.
I don't blame them for making those types of mistakes. Plus, you also have to deal with the fact that it's a video game. So the example I gave before, where it's like that tree should have always been there, because you would have always planted that seed in the past. Obviously, that would completely remove that gameplay section, where that whole plot line where you have to find that seed, plant the tree, get the fruit, and then revive the Thunder Dragon. That whole plot point would not be possible in that case, because the Light Dragon would, or the Thunder Dragon would just always be alive because you've already done it.
Exactly.
So one of my commenters raised a very interesting point. It might actually be Xavier here, who's in chat, but they brought up the idea that time shift stones modify time differently than if you go through the time gate, which is
possible.
weird. And I really don't want to juggle two forms of time travel in one story. I like time travel, but not that much. But maybe that could account for it, because I believe you use time shift stones somehow to interact with the tree, if I recall. It's been a while.
Yeah. Well, it's just like I said, it's just really, really, really difficult to write cohesive stories using time travel. It's a well-known issue. There's a reason why there's so little. There are so little stories that make sense. The whole, because it's such a intangible concept to us humans in general. You know, like the whole Back to the Future ideas where you go back into time to kill your parents and then you disappear because you would have never existed. But how would you have killed your parents if you never existed? You know, that's a paradox.
Bootstrap, yeah.
Yeah, that would never ever work. So, but the problem, I guess, with Tears is the time travel doesn't impact the gameplay itself. Not really, anyway. Aside from recall, maybe, which is a very localized piece of time travel where you just rewind an object. But even the characters inside the story don't seem to understand how it works, because Rauru completely contradicts the idea of the time travel. Because there's one scene where he's talking to Zelda about it, and Zelda's like, "Oh my God, yeah, the guy Ganondorf is gonna do all this horrible stuff, and he came back in our time." And Raru's like, "Well, calm down, calm down. That was a future where you were not here or something." It's like, well,
Right.
no,
He makes that claim. No,
that's
he
not how it
absolutely
works,
was.
Raru. Yeah, it's already on the mural. So
Exactly.
it already happened. It's a closed time loop. So either, obviously, you can just chalk that up to Raru simply not understanding how the time travel works. Which, you know, I mean, kind of fits his character. He's kind of vapid in a in a way. So he is one of the dumber characters in a Zelda story, I would say.
By far.
I like Raru, but yeah,
I like him too.
Maybe he's a little dumb.
I
Nerd
like
has
him.
all the brains.
But he's as dumb as most kings in the Zelda series have been, where they're like, "Oh yeah, Ganondorf, my old friend," and it's like he's so clearly evil and trying to take over the world, you know.
But I at least preferred, like, I at least saw Ganondorf's previous attempts at taking over and having good relations with the king as being more of like a very talented political manipulator, right? Like there was a difference. Like in Ocarina of Time, like there was a common interest of alliance between the royal family and the Gerudo. But in Tears of the Kingdom, like it's they literally spell it out that they understand that he is evil from the very beginning, and Rauru just says, "Yeah, I know he's evil, and I want him to be close by so I can keep an eye." Like, what kind of logic is that, right?
Well, it's the whole like keep your enemy close.
Keep your enemy close, yeah. But there is only one enemy, I guess.
Exactly.
So there's not really a political game to be played here. Like if you look at like real life history and how, you know, past dictators who were also clearly evil chose other dictators to befriend because they kind of work towards the same goal, but they're also kind of stabbing each other in the back and we're always planning to ruin each other at some point, but it's like a temporary alliance. You don't have that kind of Game of Thrones type of deal going on here in Tears of the Kingdom. It's just the Gerudo are literally the only tribe who've been reluctant to answer the king's call to you know, acknowledge his new kingdom and to live under their banner.
Well,
So
all the other tribes are just monsters that don't count, like bokoblins.
No, I mean like the Rito and the.
I know. I'm just saying that like
Oh, you mean
there are a bunch of other potentially intelligent creatures that
yeah.
don't get considered.
But I guess you can compare that to, a wolf not really caring about what the government says, because that goes way over their head, politics or social structure.
So
But
earlier, I brought up how the depths might have been inspired by Stranger Things. You mentioning Game of Thrones reminded me that it's possible some of the political stuff they were trying to pull here was inspired by, Game of Thrones. But they obviously couldn't go as deep. I've always sort of wondered if that was part of what they were aiming for.
maybe.
Yeah,
I always felt it was more Lord of the Rings inspired, where you
Yeah.
just have all these different tribes and this one evil rising in the east, and then
exactly same.
you know,
Same. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that is the more likely outcome. Like if it had more like a Game of Thrones inspiration, I think that would have been a more stronger focus on the political game. And
well, Game of Thrones is very morally gray.
yeah, exactly. And even in terms of like art direction, I think that it would have reflected a bit as well. Since you're familiar with Final Fantasy, I think FF16 is pretty blatant. Like that's a work that the devs were transparent in saying that they were inspired by Game of Thrones, and you can tell like when you play the game, like the story is you follow a lot of political intrigue. So
that's actually the one I haven't played.
oh, okay. So it's
so I just want to throw it out there quickly.
Okay.
I haven't played 16 yet. It's on my list when it goes on sale again.
Okay.
But
yeah, it's basically visible. Like the art direction is much grittier. The characters have a gray morality, and there is a lot of political intrigue before it goes bananas. But that's not relevant here. But
I've basically heard that there's a bunch of magical slavery, and the main character seems pretty okay with being a slave.
It's pretty nonsensical, like in terms of how they built that world of slavery, in terms of the branding and the people, because those who are slaves are the people who have the power to destroy their masters easily if they wanted to, and there is no explanation on like how in the world did they manage to do it. But there are other things. There is a very good channel that did a very good critique on FF16 and this particular topic as well, called Orion85. He might be watching this video, this live stream, either today or tomorrow, something like that. And if you want to take a look, I highly suggest you check it out. It's really good. But anyways, Tears of the Kingdom, I think that Monster Maze, I think nailed it more. Like I think that the Lord of the Rings inspiration has been there, I think, since the beginning, actually. Like even from the first Legend of Zelda, there is still a lot of mythology and how they built their world and races around this mystical and archetypical story. So I think that this still persists here in Tears of the Kingdom. I think it's just very weak in terms of how they present where Ganondorf comes from. Like there is not really much to work with, and the reasoning for Rauru just being okay with him being close by just doesn't make a lot of sense. So yeah. Anyways, so I don't want to hold you guys much longer. I know that it is pretty late for you, Pixel, but I just want to say before we go that a lot of people are very excited for Masterworks. And I want to say that regardless of the outcome, I hope that people are not appealing or starting to accept this mentality that a work of art needs third-party material to make sense. A work should be complete on its own, and it should have space for inference and negative space, which third-party material can complement well, but I think differently from Breath of the Wild. Like Masterworks for Breath of the Wild added some context, but they weren't crucial to understanding the story, and you could tell a lot of what was in Masterworks already from within the game. Like that's why I remember seeing a lot of theory videos from Monster Maze, I think, and Zeltic, Nintendo Black Crisis, that they nailed it even before the book came out, I think. It's easy to tell, but with Tears of the Kingdom, there's just so much that we are not given like any satisfying explanation for anything that is crucial for the payoffs and the state of the universe, and we are relying on Masterworks to give us answers. I don't know if people are going to be okay with this in the future. I hope not. I don't know if Masterworks is going to answer everything. And even in terms of the timeline that everybody is hyping, I think it's just going to be like what Masterworks had for Breath of the Wild plus the events of Tears of the Kingdom. I don't think that they're going to say, oh, it's at the end of this timeline, or it's going.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
They're not going to. But
No.
let me just quickly respond to that by saying there is a writing tool called Death of the Author.
Yeah.
And basically what this states is a piece of art, a piece of media needs to be able to stand on its own. Supplementary material is nice and all, but it's
Final
not
Fantasy 15.
crucial.
Yeah.
That is
Exactly.
Oh, you did? Oh, you
One-
didn't watch the movie? Well, tough luck for
Tough
you,
luck.
my friend. You're not gonna.
I might be
understand
willing
this
to
story.
say that Final Fantasy 15 was created with that as part of the experience. But
Yeah,
what you're saying is valid. Is Death of the Author could be applied to the Kingsglaive movie, but Death of the Author also could be applied to any of these books, be it Hyrule Historia or director interviews or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
The work needs to stand on its own. And I know some people will try to say that's not true, but I want to bring up a really important reason why it's important. In Harry Potter, Dumbledore was revealed to be gay by Rowling, but there is not very much in the book to support this. It is widely believed she said that solely to gain social brownie points in the media without actually doing the work of building it. So, in this case, that representation is not earned, and Death of the Author is the tool to discredit her.
Yeah, I'm kind of like I believe in the death of the author, but to an extent, because I think that non-diegetic context of like the work's creation and the thought process of the author can help us understand better what is the most likely outcome, what is the most likely vision behind what you see before you, right? So like you might have something that is quote unquote open to interpretation, like for example FF7's ending, but if you know like the philosophy of Hironobu Sakaguchi, the guy who created the story like based on his own philosophy of life and death, etc., which by the way I think that Tears of the Kingdom inherited, like the imagery of the live stream is so blatant in Tears of the Kingdom inside the shrines, and how the green energy is basically like you can see in the in those stones that what were they called?
It's based on same type of
Yeah,
Japanese influence.
exactly. So like it has that you know, if you understand the philosophy of the author, you can understand the work better. That's what I'm trying to say. Like, even though that death of the author, like if the author suddenly comes out and says, you know, oh, I always intended this thing, even though there is no support, like actually the work might even contradict what they say, which is very frequent in Final Fantasy in particular. There is, you can still use the work as a way to say, you know, oh, the death of the author applies here, but it is still important to understand what the author was doing at the time of creating that work to understand what they were trying to communicate. So I guess I find myself a bit in the middle of the road there.
Well, I'm trying to stay positive about the whole situation. I mean, I am happy that there is a Masterworks book coming, because I wasn't expecting it. that to happen at all. I thought that after the art book that was included in the collector's edition, I thought they will probably not do it this time then, because they already have an art book with all kinds of concept art, and so why would they do another one? So I kind of gave up on that idea. So I am happy that it's coming. It's making me more open to getting back to Tears of the Kingdom type of theories, because I do feel like, will it answer every single question? No, probably not. Will every answer be satisfactory or make sense to you? Probably not. But at least we're going to get a lot more information that we can work with, and maybe it will at least make the lore a little bit more make it make sense, make it more consistent. I agree with you that the story should have been able to do that by itself. It's one thing to have a mysterious building somewhere that you cannot explain what it is, and then the book finally gives you like a little hint what it could have been or what it is, and having two characters die before they ever show that they had offspring in a story, where it's like,
yes, I was going to ask this in the next part of the stream. Like, Sonia is killed, but Zelda is her descendant. How is this possible? Like, who is their offspring?
Both of them die. Yeah,
exactly.
You literally see both of them die, and there's not a single indication in the entire story that they had offspring. There's no. They could have easily hit some of those details in those little stone monuments, the one with the broken English, the old Hylian text.
Yeah.
They could have had a line in there somewhere, because it was apparently written by someone who, like a servant or someone.
The Chamberlain.
Yeah, the Chamberlain. They could have made her tell that story, like, oh, I had to take care of the prince or the princess or whatever. They could have easily put something in the story, something in the game that would have alluded to the fact that, yes, they did have offspring. You cannot kill two characters right before you specifically explain that they are blood related by blood, and then not explain or even hint at the fact that they had offspring. We're not talking about some random like NPC here. We're talking about the future of the kingdom of Hyrule, the future prince or princess of Hyrule. Not exactly.
They really needed to give us that one tablet talking about Zelda's mushroom fashion. That was really important.
Yeah.
Not this offspring thing, but Zelda's mushroom fashion.
It's just like, and I've seen people try to justify it by saying like, well, just because you don't show it doesn't mean it didn't happen. It's like, yeah, but not everything has to be a mystery. Some things you just need to explain. It's like story writing 101. You cannot have your main character of your story at the beginning of the movie being hit by a car, and then one scene later he's fine again, and they never explain how he survived that or whatever. Some things you just don't do, and this is one of them. You need to explain these kind of this kind of stuff.
No, can you when we sorry, when you talk about this specific plot point, you start to realize just how broken the story is, right? Because my goodness gracious, sorry. My God, I need a glass of water. Thank you. So after both of them die, like both Rauru and Sonia die, can you imagine like how relevant to Ganondorf's plot is if there is actually a descendant of them, like an inheritor to the throne? Like,
yeah,
it would be such a vital point for the story, right? Like, he should have immediately after killing Sonia and becoming the Demon King, like he should have went directly to their offspring, right? But we're not told anything. And imagine, so Sonia and Rauru die, and then Zelda becomes a dragon. What the heck happens to Hyrule as a kingdom afterwards? How can the offspring... Yeah?
2 words. Civil War.
Yeah, exactly.
I was going to make a big video about this because
it's
I
like
have
in Shogun. Like when the Shogun dies and his son is like way too young to rule.
So this concept of Sonia having a child, Don, you made that video about Zelda having a Triforce, and I had feeling like a very similar thought process to you with it, and we talked about it on the side before.
Yeah.
But thinking about Sonia's mystery child actually made me decide that the Triforce is not being handed down from mother to child. And the reason why is because if a child existed that had the Triforce and all this calamity took place, I think that child would undo it with their love for their parent.
Yeah,
I was
maybe.
gonna make a Mother's Day video about this, but decided against it.
Yeah, like I think that this is why it's so important to address this, because the royal family, of course, like what Angelo is saying, that it's obvious that they had a child. Yes, by inference, it's obvious. But the problem is not that, oh, we weren't explained that it exists. The problem is that it exists, but how did we get from point A to point B considering how things were left off? Because they had an offspring. If that offspring was old enough, they should have been in the throne room, right? Where when Ganondorf pledges allegiance, he should have been there because he's a prince, but he's not there, so he's most likely a child. If he's a child and both of them die, and Zelda becomes a dragon, who is there to guarantee that he should be the king and bring union to the kingdom? Like there,
Yeah.
this
It
is
just
so
occurred.
important. Like you can't just drop that and just, oh, it just happens like that. That's very very like normatively speaking, this is not good writing. This is bad writing. Like you
It
need,
just occurred to me
yeah.
that maybe that line at the start of the game where Zelda says that it's stated or it is believed that her ancestors and the Zonai had children. But what if that is a misconception on part of people? Because when Zelda was in the past, with Waru in and Sonia in the throne room, if they came to believe that Zelda was her child,
If
that's an interesting thought. I'm going to have to come back to, but it is 3:40 in the morning for me. So I
it
think
is
I'm going to go,
fascinating.
guys.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Pixel. And yeah, I'm going to save this topic. This is really interesting. This is amazing. Thank you so much. So I'm going to save this for part 2. This was, as you guys can tell, like you kind viewers, this game, this topic, this important work of art is it has such a massive scope, and there is so much to talk about that it was very hard. Like even from the beginning, when I was planning this stream, when I was trying to write down the topics, our guests here they already had a look at it, and they can probably tell as well. There's just so much important things to talk about, and it's so there's a lot to cover, a lot of ground to cover. So I want to do justice to this game and to this topic. So I want to invite everyone for a part 2 of this stream with the same guests. We'll be arranging a time slot for the near future, and as soon as we arrange it, I'll announce it in the proper channels. So do you guys have any final thoughts, any closing thoughts? And of course, you can show your channel, go for it. I'm here to also support you guys as well. Everybody who's watching, support our guests here. All right?
Yeah, well, Monster Maze on YouTube and at Monster Maze YT on Twitter. I think most people know what I do, at least the people that watch your channel, right?
You're a
Plus,
big guy, Don.
I already talked about what I do at the beginning, so I'm not gonna rehash that here. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thank you for having me, first of all, and
Yeah.
I hope we can talk more in part 2, because yeah, there is some stuff I still want to say, but it's just too much, and I have to get back to my day.
Of course, of course. And thank you. It's an honor to have you here, Monster Maze. Actually, from old time viewers here of the Roundtable, Monster Maze is one of the first 2 veterans in this series of streams. So, congratulations.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, and you, Pixel Fusion, well, thank you as well. Of course, you can say your final thoughts.
Yeah. So Pixel Fusion Productions on YouTube. You guys are hopefully aware of me by now. I do Zelda and Final Fantasy stuff right now, so that's where I am.
Wonderful.
Thanks
wonderful.
again for having me. It was great to get connected with you as well as the other guest, and I am falling asleep.
Yeah, go get some sleep, man.
Go get
It's
some
important.
sleep. Yeah. Have a good one, Pixel, and have a good one, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our stream.
Zelda being mistaken for her child. That's really interesting.